A single mother went on a blind date and met a billionaire with his son. What he did changed everything forever. A love story and transformation that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. Friday night arrived with that typical March buzz in New York City, where the stubborn summer still left the air heavy and sticky even after the sun hid behind the skyscrapers of Fifth Avenue. The Skyline Bistro, located on a rooftop in the heart of Manhattan, was packed, as it always was, on weekends. The murmur of conversations blended with the clinking of wine glasses and the soft jazz escaping from strategically placed speakers among the tropical plants that decorated the space. David Montgomery pushed the heavy smoked glass door with more force than necessary, showing a contained irritation he tried to hide from his son. At 42, David was known nationwide as the billionaire who had revolutionized the sustainable technology sector in the United States. His face regularly appeared on the covers of Forbes and Business Insider, always with that serious and controlled expression that concealed any real emotion. Tall, at 6 feet 1 inch, with broad shoulders that perfectly filled his tailored Italian suits, dark hair cut with millimeter precision starting to show silver strands at the temples, and dark brown eyes that seemed to calculate every situation as if it were a business negotiation. He wore a discreet but expensive Swiss watch, and his Italian leather shoes shone even under the soft light of the restaurant. "Dad, you don't have to stay," murmured Ethan, his 16-year-old son, nervously adjusting the collar of the navy blue polo shirt that David had insisted he wear. "I know you have more important things to do." Ethan was different from his father in almost every way. Slim, at 5 feet 7 inches, with slightly slumped shoulders that betrayed an insecure posture. Light brown hair always tousled, no matter how hard he tried to fix it. Light green eyes inherited from his biological mother, who he had never met. Fair skin with some typical teenage acne that he tried to hide by letting his bangs fall over his forehead. There was a fragility about him, a constant search for approval that was evident in every hesitant gesture. David placed his hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting, but came off as mechanical, too formal. "I promised your grandmother I would come, and I want to meet this family she has praised so much." What he didn't say, but clearly thought, was that he suspected the true intentions of that family. Mrs. Beatrice, his mother, had the annoying habit of trying to control every aspect of their lives, especially after he became a widower 5 years ago. She had absurdly insisted on this arranged meeting, saying that Ethan needed to socialize with people of the same social standing. David had agreed only to see if those people were genuinely interested in the boy, or just in the Montgomery name and everything it represented. The maitre d' immediately approached, recognizing David. "Mr. Montgomery, what a pleasure to have you with us. The other party has already arrived. They are at table 23, near the windows with a view of the city." As they followed the maitre d' through the restaurant, David observed the environment with his usual analytical gaze. Dark wooden tables, brown leather-upholstered chairs, intimate lighting creating small islands of golden light, hanging plants descending from the high ceiling, and floor-to-ceiling glass windows revealing New York City illuminated like an ocean of twinkling lights. The smell in the air was a sophisticated mix of grilled meats, refined sauces, red wine, and expensive perfumes. It was when he turned left, rounding a mirrored pillar, that the world seemed to stop. Sitting at the back table, with her back to the window and the infinite city as a backdrop, was she, Marina Smith, the woman he hadn't seen in exactly 15 years, 3 months and 12 days, but who had never really left his memory, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise. The scent reached him even before his brain fully processed the sight. Lavender, that simple, almost old-fashioned perfume she always wore because she said it was the only one that didn't give her a headache. The aroma instantly transported him to that distant summer when he was 27 and thought he could conquer the world without losing his soul in the process. Marina looked different, obviously. 15 years change anyone. But her essence remained intact. She was now 37, and the grey strands that were starting to appear in her dark brown hair were deliberately on display, with no attempt to dye them. She wore her hair in a low bun, with a few rebellious strands escaping and framing her face. Her hazel eyes still had that intensity that always disarmed him. But there were wrinkles at the corners that hadn't existed before, expression lines that told stories he would never know. She wore a simple yet elegant beige linen blouse, with no jewelry except for a modest silver wristwatch. And David noticed she still had that same aversion to ostentation that had irritated him when they were younger. His heart raced, his hands suddenly became clammy, his mouth went dry. Physical reactions he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps decades. David Montgomery, the man who negotiated million-dollar contracts without blinking, felt like an awkward teenager. But it was what he saw next to her that made his world literally stop spinning. A 14-year-old girl with dark hair cascading in natural waves over her shoulders, light brown skin, delicate yet striking features. And the eyes. My God, the eyes. They were exactly the same dark brown eyes he saw in every morning David looked in the mirror. The same shade, the same almond shape, the same intensity. The girl even had that same small birthmark on her left eyebrow that he had. A tiny mark, almost imperceptible, that only someone paying close attention would notice. David felt his legs weaken. He grabbed the back of an empty chair, pretending to adjust his posture, but actually needing physical support to avoid stumbling. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan asked, genuine concern in his voice. "You look pale." "I'm fine," David lied, forcing his voice to sound normal while his inner world was in complete chaos. "Just remembered something from work. Nothing important." Lily had seen him. The exact moment she turned her face and their eyes met was like an electric shock cutting through the thick air of the restaurant. She visibly paled, her hand freezing in mid-air as she reached for her glass of water. The liquid trembled slightly inside the glass, revealing that she wasn't as composed as she appeared. For a fraction of a second, the world contained only the two of them. All the noise of the restaurant faded away. Other people ceased to exist. It was just David and Lily, 15 years of silence and unanswered questions, weighing in the air between them like a physical presence. But then the girl turned away, and David saw her face completely for the first time. She was beautiful, with that still-forming beauty of adolescence, where childish features begin to give way to more defined traits. She wore a simple floral dress, no makeup, her hair loose and natural. There was a sharp intelligence in her eyes, a perception that made David wonder how much she saw, how much she understood. "Hi," the girl said cheerfully, waving to Ethan with a genuine smile that lit up her face. "You must be Ethan. Your grandma talked a lot about you. I'm Lily." Ethan smiled back, visibly relaxing. "Hi, Lily. Yeah, my grandma, she does talk a lot." He laughed nervously, clearly relieved that she seemed friendly. It was at that moment that David made a decision. His businessman brain, trained to assess complex situations and make quick decisions under pressure, kicked into gear. He had two options: create a scene, demand explanations immediately, or control the situation and uncover the truth strategically. The second option won. David approached the table with firm steps, putting his social mask perfectly in place. He extended his hand to Marina with a polite but distant smile, as if she were a complete stranger. "Good evening, David Montgomery. I hope you don't mind if I join you. My mother, Mrs. Beatrice, organized this meeting, and I wanted to meet the family she praised so much." Marina looked at the extended hand as if it were a venomous snake. For one endless second, David thought she would refuse the handshake, that she would expose him, shout the truth right there in the crowded restaurant. But then she also put on her mask, and he saw the willpower that it required of her. "Marina Smith," she said in a voice that only he noticed was slightly trembling, "and this is my daughter Lily." She subtly emphasized the word "my," and David caught the implicit warning in that possessive pronoun. They sat down, and what should have been an awkward arranged meeting between two teenagers turned into something completely different. The maitre d' brought the menus, a heavy leather folder with parchment pages listing sophisticated dishes in English and French. David ordered an expensive red wine, not because he wanted to drink, but because he needed to do something with his hands that were trembling imperceptibly. "So, Ethan," Lily said, demonstrating a social ease that the boy clearly lacked, "your grandma told me you like astronomy. I do too. I just read a book about exoplanets that was fascinating." Ethan immediately perked up, his eyes shining. "Really? I read that too. What did you think of the theory about the habitable zone of the TRAPPIST-1 system?" As the teenagers enthusiastically discussed distant planets and possibilities of extraterrestrial life, David and Marina faced each other in a silent duel. He watched her like a hawk, noticing every detail, her hands ringless with short, practical nails, the way she nervously fiddled with the cloth napkin on her lap, the way her eyes avoided his, focusing on any other point in the restaurant. "Marina works as a sustainability consultant," he said suddenly, and she looked at him in surprise. "I did my research before coming," he explained coldly. "I always investigate people before meeting them in person. Businessman habit." "How practical," Marina replied with a hint of sarcasm that only he detected. "And efficient. I imagine you don't like surprises." "I hate surprises," he agreed, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made the temperature between them rise dangerously. "Especially those that should have been revealed long ago." Marina swallowed hard, but kept her gaze steady. "Sometimes people keep secrets for valid reasons, to protect those they love, or to protect themselves," David retorted softly, making sure only she heard while the teenagers continued their lively conversation about the universe. The waiter arrived to take their orders, momentarily interrupting the tension. Lily ordered a mushroom risotto, Ethan chose a filet mignon with mushroom sauce, Marina opted for a simple grilled fish, and David, without even looking at the menu, ordered the same thing he always ordered at that restaurant, a leek lamb, that he wasn't even sure he could eat with his stomach churning. When the waiter walked away, Lily looked at David with genuine curiosity. "Mr. Montgomery, is it true that your company develops solar panels that are 30% more efficient than conventional ones? I read about it in an article." David smiled, and for the first time since entering the restaurant, it was a genuine smile. He always appreciated when young people showed interest in sustainable technology. That's true. We use a multi-layer photovoltaic cell technology. Do you understand solar energy?" "I'm learning," Lily replied enthusiastically. "My mom taught me a lot about sustainability. She always says that her generation ruined the planet and that mine needs to fix it." Marina blushed slightly. "I don't say it exactly like that." "Yes, you do," Lily laughed, with that unconditional affection that only children have for their mothers. "But I like it. It's important." David observed the interaction between mother and daughter, and something tightened in his chest. There was an intimacy there, a bond built over years, of nights caring for fevers, of help with homework, of conversations before bed, of shared secrets. A whole life that he was not a part of, a whole existence that had happened without him, If that girl was really his, if those eyes identical to his meant what he was beginning to suspect with a growing and terrifying certainty, then Marina had stolen 14 years from him. 14 birthdays, 14 first days of school, 14 Christmas nights, 14 years of being a father. Anger began to simmer beneath his skin, a cold and controlled fury that was infinitely more dangerous than any emotional explosion. But looking at Lily, seeing her easy laughter, her natural intelligence, her kindness towards Ethan, he couldn't feel only anger. There was also a strange and premature pride and a paralyzing fear that he was about to discover a truth that would change everything. "Mom," Lily suddenly said, turning to Marina, "are you okay? You barely touched your water." "I'm great, dear," Marina lied with a skill that clearly came from years of practice. "Just thinking about work. Nothing important." David realized she was lying as blatantly as he had lied to Ethan minutes earlier. They were two actors on a stage, playing roles for an audience of two innocent teenagers who had no idea of the drama unfolding before them. The food arrived, and everyone pretended to eat while maintaining superficial conversations. Ethan and Lily discovered they attended rival schools in the same robotics championship. Marina commented on a recent project evaluating the carbon footprint of a textile industry. David vaguely talked about a new factory he was building in upstate New York City, but beneath the surface, beneath the polite words and forced smiles, a hurricane was forming. And David knew, with the absolute certainty of someone who had built an empire based on intuition and strategic analysis, that when that hurricane finally touched down, nothing would remain in the same place. He looked at Lily again, memorizing her features, searching for more similarities beyond the eyes. The shape of her chin was his. The curve of her smile was his. Even the way she gestured while speaking, using her hands to emphasize points, was eerily familiar. His daughter. He had a daughter. The revelation hit him with the force of a speeding train, leaving him breathless. David Montgomery, the man who always had a plan, who always controlled every situation, was completely lost. And looking at Marina, seeing the barely concealed fear in her eyes, he knew she knew exactly what he was thinking. The night was just beginning, and it was already clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The restaurant began to slowly empty as the night progressed, but table 23 remained occupied, caught in a kind of temporal limbo, where no one seemed to have the courage to take the first step to end the gathering. David discreetly watched the clock. It was already past 11, yet he couldn't simply get up and leave, not when there were so many questions hammering in his head with the force of a jackhammer. Ethan and Lily were animatedly discussing science fiction movies, completely oblivious to the silent storm occurring among the adults. David felt a pang of guilt that surprised him. It was the first time in months he had seen his son so relaxed, so genuinely happy. The boy used to be withdrawn, especially in social situations, always seeming to carry the weight of expectations he created in his own mind. "Mom, can we go to the movies next Saturday?" Lily suddenly asked, turning to Marina with those bright, enthusiastic eyes. "That Steven Spielberg movie I told you about is coming out. Ethan wants to see it too, right, Ethan?" Ethan glanced quickly at David, as if silently asking for permission. It was such an automatic gesture, so ingrained that he probably didn't even realize he was doing it. David felt another pang of guilt. When had Ethan started seeking approval for every little decision? When had he, David, become that kind of controlling father who needed to be consulted about a simple trip to the movies? "Of course," David replied before he could rethink it. "Sounds great." Marina looked at him with an expression that was part surprise, part distrust. "How kind of you," she said, and there was a layer of meaning in her words that only he could understand. "Lily, dear, let's see if we have time. You know Saturdays can be busy." "Mum, we never do anything on Saturdays except clean the house, and you work on your laptop," Lily retorted with that brutal honesty that only teenagers possess. "Please? It's been ages since we just went out to have fun." David saw Marina hesitate, saw the conflict unfold on her face. She clearly didn't want to prolong the situation, didn't want to create more opportunities for him and her to have to interact. But she also didn't want to disappoint her daughter, didn't want to seem like the rigid and inflexible mother. "All right," Marina finally conceded, and Lily practically jumped in her seat with joy. "But you two choose a sensible time, no midnight showings. How about the 7 o'clock show?" Ethan suggested, looking between Lily and David. "That way we can have dinner afterward if you want." "Perfect," Lily agreed immediately. David. He realized the trap that had just closed around them. A movie date would mean that he and Marina would have to meet again. They would have to maintain that charade of polite strangers, unless... "Actually," David said carefully, "how about I drop Ethan off at the theater and then come back to pick him up? I'm sure you two would prefer to watch the movie without adults hovering." It was the wrong thing to say. He immediately saw it on Ethan's face, the way the sparkle in his eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by that resigned expression that broke David's heart. "Yeah," Ethan murmured, looking down at his empty plate. "Sure. You probably have more important things to do anyway." Marina watched the interaction with sharp attention, and David felt the uncomfortable sensation of being analyzed and judged. She had always had that irritating gift of seeing through his defenses, of noticing the contradictions between what he said and how he truly felt. "Or," Lily interjected with surprising diplomacy for her age, "the adults could grab a coffee somewhere nearby while we watch the movie. That way it wouldn't be so boring for you, and we would have our freedom too." It was a perfect solution, and everyone knew it. Ethan nodded enthusiastically, clearly relieved not to have been completely rejected. Marina opened her mouth as if to protest, but then simply closed it and nodded in silent agreement. "Great. Then it's settled," Lily declared, satisfied, unaware that she had just orchestrated something much more significant than a simple movie outing. The waiter brought the check, and David immediately took it, ignoring Marina's piercing glare. "My treat," he said firmly, making it clear that he would not accept any objections. "How chivalrous," Marina commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you." They stood up, and the maître appeared immediately to bid David farewell, clearly accustomed to treating him as a VIP client. David noticed Marina observing that deference, saw something that could have been disdain, or perhaps jealousy, briefly cross her face before she composed her neutral expression. Outside the restaurant, the March air was muggy and heavy, that sticky humidity that precedes the big summer storms. Bella Sintra Street was bustling even at that hour, cars parading at a moderate speed, the buzz of other restaurants and bars nearby creating a characteristic urban soundtrack of New York City. David's valet brought his car first, a pristine black Porsche Cayenne that gleamed under the streetlights. Ethan got in on the passenger side. Without saying anything, accustomed to that discreet yet undeniable luxury, Marina and Lily were waiting for their own car, and David noticed that they had arrived by Uber. There was no valet bringing any vehicle, no car keys being searched in Marina's bag. Another glaring difference between their worlds. David hesitated, his hand on the driver's door handle. He should just leave, let that meeting end there. But the words came out before he could censor them. "Can I give you a ride? I know you came by Uber." Marina looked at him with an expression that was pure challenge. "How do you know we came by Uber?" "Because I know how to observe," David replied simply, "and because I know you." It was the wrong thing to say again. Marina visibly stiffened, and Lily looked between the two adults with a growing curiosity that made David realize he needed to be more careful. The girl was smart, observant. She was already sensing that there was something unsaid in the air. "Very kind, but I already called our Uber," Marina lied softly, pulling out her phone as if to check the app. "It should arrive in a few minutes." "All right, then," David said, knowing it would be pointless to insist. "See you Saturday." "See you Saturday," Lily replied cheerfully, waving to Ethan. "It was really nice to meet you." Ethan smiled back, genuine. "You too. See you Saturday." David got into the car and started the engine, but he didn't leave immediately. Through the rearview mirror, he watched Marina finally actually call an Uber, saw her embrace her daughter by the shoulders as they waited, saw Lily say something that made Marina laugh, a quick, low laugh that disappeared as quickly as it came. "Dad," Ethan said softly, pulling David from his thoughts. "Did you know her before?" David's heart raced. "Who?" "Marina, Lily's mom." Ethan looked at him with those perceptive green eyes. "You got weird when you saw her. And you two seemed, I don't know, like you were having a conversation that no one else could hear." David considered lying, but lies had the inconvenient habit of multiplying and eventually blowing up. "We met a long time ago," he admitted carefully, "but we lost touch. It was a surprise to see her there. A good surprise or a bad one? What an impossible question to answer." "Complicated," David finally said, putting the car in motion. "The most important surprises tend to be complicated." Ethan seemed to accept that answer, turning his attention back to his phone. But David knew the question wasn't closed. His son was quiet, but he wasn't foolish. He would keep observing, connecting the dots, asking questions. As he drove through the illuminated streets of New York City toward the apartment in the Upper East Side where they lived, a 500-square-foot triplex on the top floor of a high-end building, David couldn't stop thinking about Marina, about how she had changed and yet remained the same, about how she had raised that girl alone, seemingly with limited resources, yet producing a smart, educated and confident young woman. He remembered Marina from 15 years ago with painful clarity. She was 22, freshly graduated in environmental engineering from NYU, idealistic and passionate about making a difference in the world. He was 27, already running his first startup, obsessed with proving that he was more than just the heir to a wealthy family. They had met at an event about clean technologies at the convention center. David remembered how she debated with executives 3 times her age, without fear or excessive deference, just with solid arguments and unwavering conviction. She had completely ignored him that first night, not even impressed when someone mentioned his last name. This intrigued him deeply. He was used to being noticed, courted, adored. It took 3 weeks to get a date with her, another 2 for her to finally agree to have dinner with him, and when it finally happened, it was different from anything he had ever known. Marina was not impressed by fancy restaurants or his Porsche. She laughed at his attempts to impress her, saying he was trying too hard. For 6 incredible and tumultuous months, they lived a kind of intensity that David had never experienced before or since. Marina constantly challenged him, questioned his priorities, forced him to rethink concepts he took for granted. She was stubborn, impossible to manipulate or control, and completely averse to the world of appearances in which he lived. The final fight happened on a July night, after a disastrous dinner at Mrs. Beatrice's house. His mother had been subtly cruel to Marina all night, making comments about girls trying to climb the social ladder through convenient relationships. Marina had endured it all in tense silence, but when they left, she exploded. "I can't take this anymore, David," she said, her eyes shining with anger and contained tears. "Your mother treats me like I'm an opportunist. Your friends look at me like I'm a temporary toy. And you You never really defend me. You just stand there uncomfortable, but you never take my side." "It's not that simple," David retorted, frustrated. "My mother is complicated. She needs time to accept things." "Time?" Marina laughed humorlessly. "David, we've been together for 6 months. How much time does she need? And more importantly, why do you need her approval for everything?" The argument escalated quickly. He said things he shouldn't have said. She responded with truths he wasn't ready to hear. And then came the line that would change everything. "Anyway, it's not like this is going to last forever," David said with that defensive arrogance he always assumed when he felt cornered. "I don't want kids, Marina. Never have. The idea of being a father, of repeating my parents' mistakes, of bringing a child into this messed up world, I can't do it. And I know you want a family, you want kids, so maybe it's better to end this now before it hurts more." The silence that followed was deafening. Marina looked at him with an expression he would never forget. It was not just hurt, it was deep disappointment, as if she finally saw who he really was and was let down by the revelation. "You're right," she said calmly, chillingly calm. "It's better to end this right now." She got out of his car right there, in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and walked under the light drizzle of July without looking back. David sat there for long minutes, hoping she would return, that she would change her mind, but she didn't come back. He tried calling in the following days. His calls went straight to voicemail. His emails went unanswered. When he finally went to her apartment in Brooklyn, the neighbor informed him that Marina had moved out. And no, she didn't know where. David eventually gave up, convincing himself it was for the best. He dove into work with renewed intensity. 6 months later, he met Ji-woo, a delicate and quiet Korean designer who never challenged him, never argued, never demanded more than he was willing to give. They married within a year in an elegant but emotionally flat ceremony. And when Ji-woo suggested adoption 2 years later, she also couldn't have biological children. David agreed as long as it was on his terms, with his rules. Ethan came into their lives when he was 3, a shy and scared Korean boy who barely spoke English. David provided the best tutors, the best schools, everything money could buy. But he never really managed to connect emotionally with the boy. And when Ji-woo died in a car accident 5 years ago, David found himself trying to raise a preteen, son alone, with no idea how to be the kind of father the boy needed. "Dad, we passed our building," Ethan said, pulling David out of his memories. David blinked, realizing he had driven right past the entrance of the building where they lived, lost in thought. He turned around the block, irritated with himself for that lack of attention. The apartment was silent and dark when they entered. The housekeeper had already left, leaving everything impeccably clean and organized as always. David turned on the lights in the spacious living room, with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling glass windows offering a panoramic view of the illuminated city. "Dad," Ethan said hesitantly, standing at the entrance of the living room, "did you like Lily?" David turned to look at his son. Really look. Ethan suddenly seemed smaller, younger than his 16 years, with that hopeful expression of someone who fears disappointment. "She seems like a very smart and well-mannered girl," David replied honestly. "Did you like her?" "Very much," Ethan admitted, blushing slightly. "She is different. She doesn't care about the things most people care about. You know, she didn't ask about money or where we live or what kind of a car we have. She just wanted to talk about real things." David felt that tightness in his chest again. "She's her mother's daughter," he murmured, more to himself than to Ethan. "What?" "Nothing. Just thinking that she took after her mother in character." Ethan hesitated, clearly wanting to ask more, but then just nodded. "I'm going to sleep. Good night, Dad." Good night, Ethan." David waited until he heard. As the door to his son's room closed, he walked over to the built-in bar in the living room. He poured himself a 20-year-old Scotch whiskey, but didn't drink it immediately. He simply held the glass, watching the amber liquid reflect the city lights. His phone vibrated in his pocket. An irrational part of him hoped it was Marina, but it was just an automatic work email. He opened his calendar and marked it. Saturday, 7 p.m., cinema. And then, because of who he was, he opened the browser and began to search. Marina Smith. The search returned limited results. She clearly wasn't active on social media. But he found her professional profile on LinkedIn, articles she had published on corporate sustainability, a photo of her speaking at an event on circular economy. In every photo, she had that same serious, focused expression, never really smiling at the camera. He expanded the search. Lily Smith. Even fewer results. Marina clearly protected her daughter's privacy. But there was a mention in an article about a science project at a school in Brooklyn, where Lily had won first place for a project on rainwater harvesting in urban areas. The photo showed a younger Lily, perhaps 12 years old, holding a trophy and beaming. David zoomed in on the photo, studying every detail of the girl's face. The more he looked, the more similarities he found. The line of her nose, the shape of her forehead, the way she smiled, with the left corner of her mouth lifting slightly more than the right, just like his. He abruptly closed the laptop, as if that would erase the truth that was already crystallized in his mind. Lily was his. He knew it with the same certainty he knew his own name. The question was, what was he going to do with this information? David took a sip of the whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. Tomorrow he would call his lawyer, not to file a lawsuit or do something aggressive, but to understand his rights, his options. He needed to know where he stood before taking the next step. But even as he planned his legal strategy, another part of him, a part that hadn't been allowed to speak for a long time, whispered harder questions. Why hadn't Marina told him? What had happened in the last 15 years? How had she raised that girl alone? And the most frightening question of all, would Lily be better off without him? David finished the whiskey in one gulp and went to his room, but he knew he wouldn't sleep that night. Not with a million questions hammering in his head, not with the image of those dark brown eyes, his eyes, haunting him every time he closed his eyelids. Saturday couldn't come fast enough, and at the same time, David feared what that meeting would reveal, what other truths would come to light, what other certainties of his carefully controlled life would be shattered. Marina's apartment in Brooklyn was everything David's wasn't. Small, cozy, full of life and history. It was on the third floor of a building without an elevator built in the 70s, with walls that needed painting and a lobby that consisted of just a broken intercom. But it was theirs, bought with much sacrifice and sweat, every square foot earned honestly. Marina closed the door as soon as they entered and leaned against it, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath for the first time since she had seen David at the restaurant. Her hands trembled. Her heart was still racing. The adrenaline that had kept her rigid and composed throughout dinner was now draining from her body, leaving her exhausted and scared. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked, dropping her bag on the worn but clean sofa in the living room. "You got strange at the restaurant. Do you know that man from somewhere?" Marina opened her eyes, forcing herself to compose. She couldn't fall apart now, not in front of Lily. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. It's been a long night." "But you know him, don't you?" Lily insisted, and there was that sharp perception in her eyes that always made Marina feel both proud and nervous. Her daughter was too smart for her own good sometimes. "You two were looking at each other in a weird way, like you were talking without words." Marina walked over to the small kitchenette, more to have something to do with her hands than for any other reason. She filled a glass with water from the pitcher in the fridge, drank slowly, buying time to formulate a response that wasn't a complete lie or a devastating truth. "We've known each other for a long time," she finally said, the same words she imagined David would use. "Before you were born, we worked together briefly on a project. It was a surprise to see him there." Technically, it wasn't a lie. They had worked together on a solar energy project during those intense 6 months. But it was such an edited truth, so stripped of real context, that it bordered on dishonesty. Lily studied her for a long moment, and Marina had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen through. "Okay," Lily finally said, but her expression made it clear she didn't fully believe it. "If you say so." "What did you think of Ethan?" Marina asked, changing the subject with the subtlety of an elephant in a china shop. It worked. Lily's face lit up immediately. "He's amazing, Mom, like super smart, but not in that arrogant way that most smart guys are. And he really listens when you talk, you know? He doesn't just wait for his turn to speak." Marina smiled, despite all the turmoil in her chest. "It sounds like you two hit it off really well. And Mom, he said he's reading that book on quantum mechanics I told you about. We can talk about those things without me having to simplify everything like I do with the girls at school." Lily paused, a more thoughtful expression crossing her face. "But I think he's a bit lonely, you know. Like, he has everything, but it feels empty sometimes. Did you notice?" Marina had noticed, yes. She had seen it in the way Ethan looked at David, seeking approval that rarely came. She had noticed the formality between father and son, the absence of genuine warmth or emotional connection, and it broke her heart because she recognized it. It was exactly the kind of father that David had sworn never to be, but somehow he had become that anyway. "Some people have difficulty showing affection," Marina said carefully. "It doesn't mean they don't love. It just means they don't know how to express it." "It's sad," Lily observed with that wisdom that sometimes made her seem much older than 14. "To have everything, but not really have anything that matters." Marina hugged her daughter, pulling her close and breathing in the scent of herbal shampoo in her hair. "I love you so much, you know that, right?" "I know, Mom. I love you too." Lily returned the hug and then pulled away, yawning. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. I'm exhausted." "Go ahead, sweetheart. Good night." "Good night, Mom." Marina waited until she heard Lily's bedroom door close and the sound of the shower start before finally allowing her knees to give way. She slid down the kitchen wall until she sat on the cold ceramic floor, hugging her knees to her chest and trying to control her breath that threatened to turn into sobs. David. After 15 years, David. The universe had a cruel sense of humor, putting them in the same room like that, forcing them to pretend they were strangers while all the shared history weighed in the air like a storm about to explode. And worse, much worse, he knew Marina had seen the instant recognition in his eyes when he looked at Lily. She had seen the shock, the confusion, and then that growing certainty that turned his face into a cold, calculating mask. David had always been brilliant, always connecting the dots faster than anyone she knew. He had looked at Lily and seen himself reflected in her. Marina pulled her phone from her pocket with trembling hands. She needed to... What? Call him? Text him? Demand he keep his distance? Beg him not to destroy the carefully constructed life that she and Lily had? She opened WhatsApp, typed David Montgomery in the search. Nothing. Of course, he wouldn't be in her contacts. She had deleted everything related to him 15 years ago in a fit of pain and anger right after the last failed attempt to contact him. The attempts. Marina closed her eyes, remembering those horrible days. She had discovered the pregnancy 6 weeks after that last night. Initially, she panicked, then went into denial. But when she finally accepted the reality, she decided she needed to tell David. Regardless of how the relationship had ended, he had the right to know. The first call was blocked by his assistant. "Mr. Montgomery is in meetings all day and requested not to be disturbed." The second attempt, a week later, received the same response. "Mr. Montgomery is traveling to Singapore and cannot take personal calls at the moment." Marina sent emails, 3 of them, each more desperate than the last. None received a reply. She even went to his office, but security wouldn't let her up without an appointment. She tried to schedule a time, but his calendar was completely booked for the next 3 months. In the 10th week of her pregnancy, Marina gave up. She interpreted the silence as a clear answer. David had said he didn't want kids. She had shown up pregnant. He was deliberately avoiding her. The message was crystal clear. He wanted nothing to do with this, with her, with the baby growing inside her. Marina's pride, that same stubborn pride that had always been her strength and her weakness, wouldn't allow her to keep begging. If David didn't want to know, she would raise that baby alone. She didn't need him, didn't need anyone. The following months were the hardest of her life. She was at the beginning of her career, earning little, living in a tiny apartment that barely had space for her, let alone a baby. Her parents had died in an accident when she was 18, leaving her without close family. She had a few friends, but no one who could really help financially. Marina worked until the 8th month, saving every penny. She bought baby clothes at thrift stores, second-hand furniture, accepted donations from neighbors. When Lily was born on a cold June morning, Marina was alone in the public hospital, with no one to hold her hand during labor, no one to celebrate when the nurse placed that tiny, perfect being in her arms. But the moment she looked into Lily's eyes, those dark brown eyes that were unmistakably David's, Marina knew she would do anything for that child. She would work 3 jobs if necessary, sleep 3 hours a night, sacrifice everything. And that's exactly what she did. The early years were a constant struggle. Marina did freelance consulting during the day, worked as a waitress at night, studied for professional certifications in the early morning while Lily slept. She refused government assistance out of sheer pride, even turned down help from well-meaning friends. If she was going to do this, she would do it her way, owing nothing to anyone. Eventually things got better. Her reputation as a consultant grew. Freelance jobs turned into larger contracts. She managed to rent a better apartment, then buy this one. Lily got into a good public school, then received a full scholarship to an excellent private school. They built a life, simple but good. A life where Lily never felt the lack of anything essential, even if she didn't have all the luxuries that other kids had. And throughout all those years, Marina never mentioned David. When Lily asked about her father, and she did, as every child eventually does, Marina said they had separated before she was born. He didn't know about the pregnancy, which was complicated. They weren't complete lies, but they also weren't complete truths. They were half-truths, carefully constructed to protect Lily from rejection and to protect Marina from having to admit that she might have made a mistake by giving up so easily. The sound of the shower stopping brought Marina back to the present. She quickly got up, wiping her eyes that had started to tear up, and went to her own room. It was small, barely fitting a queen-sized bed and a wardrobe, but it had a window overlooking the tree-lined street, and Marina loved waking up to the sound of birds in the trees. She mechanically changed into an old, comfortable pajama set and lay down on the bed without even brushing her teeth. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was racing in frantic circles. What would David do now? Would he demand a paternity test? Would he try to get joint custody? Would he offer money, as if 15 years could be compensated with a check? What would she say to Lily when the truth inevitably came to light? Marina picked up her phone again. This time she opened Google and typed David Montgomery. Hundreds of results appeared. Articles about his company, interviews on business shows, photos of him at corporate events, always in that perfect suit and controlled expression. She clicked on Images and was bombarded with photos of him. David speaking at conferences, David shaking hands with politicians, David receiving awards, and then a series of photos that made her heart tighten. David with Ethan at a charity event, the boy next. To him, with a polite smile but no real sparkle in his eyes. David and Ethan at a school science fair, the father looking visibly uncomfortable among so many excited children. There was one particular photo that Marina couldn't stop looking at. It was from about 2 years ago, judging by Ethan's appearance in the image. Father and son were at some kind of business awards ceremony, both in suits. David was looking straight ahead at the cameras with that professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. But Ethan was looking at his father with an expression that broke Marina's heart. Hope mixed with resignation, as if he desperately wished for paternal attention but had already learned not to truly expect it. It was exactly the kind of relationship that David had said he never wanted to have with a child. And yet, there it was. Marina abruptly closed the browser, her heart pounding. She couldn't think about this now. She couldn't start questioning all the decisions she had made over the past 15 years. She needed to stay focused, to keep control. Her phone vibrated with a message, making her jump in surprise. For a crazy second, she thought. It was David, but it was just Lily from the next room. "Mom, are you okay? I saw your room light still on." Marina quickly typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart, just finishing up some work. Go to sleep. Love you." "Love you too. Good night." Marina placed her phone on the nightstand and turned off the light, but she continued lying in the dark with her eyes open, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling as cars passed by outside. Saturday. In 5 days, she would have to see David again. She would have to sit with him in some cafe while the teenagers watched the movie, and they would probably have the talk she had been mentally avoiding for 15 years. The talk that would change everything. She needed to be prepared. She needed to have her answers ready, her arguments organized, her defenses established. But even as she tried to formulate a plan, Marina knew there was no preparation possible for the hurricane that was about to hit her carefully constructed life. From the next room, she heard Lily stirring in bed. Probably still awake too, probably thinking about Ethan and the Saturday meeting with that innocent. Excitement of someone who had no idea of the ticking time bomb about to explode. Marina squeezed her eyes shut, as if that could block out reality. But the image of David looking at Lily, connecting the dots, realizing the truth. That image was burned into her mind like hot iron on leather. "Please," she whispered to the universe, to God, to whoever was listening. "Please don't take her from me. Don't let her hate me when she finds out." But the universe didn't respond, and Marina lay there in the dark, counting the hours until Saturday, until the moment her life would irrevocably split between before and after David Montgomery entered her life again. And this time, he wouldn't leave easily. Because now there was Lily. And Lily changed everything. In the living room, the old clock that Marina had bought at an antique store years ago struck 1 in the morning, and then 2, and then 3. And Marina stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to find the courage to face what was coming, knowing that no matter how much she prepared, nothing could truly prepare her to look into her daughter's eyes and explain why she had hidden her father from her all her life. The truth, Marina knew, was a ticking time bomb, and the countdown had just begun. Monday arrived with that typical rush of New York City, the traffic jammed since 6 in the morning, the cloudy sky threatening rain that never fully fell. David was in his office on the 23rd floor of the commercial building on 5th Avenue since 7 o'clock, a cup of cold espresso already forgotten on the solid mahogany desk as he flipped through the report his lawyer had sent on Sunday night for the 3rd time. Dr. Otavio Guimarães was the best family lawyer in New York City, discreet and efficient, known for resolving delicate issues for the elite without anything leaking to the press. David had known him for years, since the proceedings of Ethan's adoption, and trusted him implicitly. The report was technical, cold. The document was filled with legal terms that translated complex emotional situations into objective paragraphs. But the essence was clear. If Lily were biologically his, David had rights. He could demand a paternity test. He could fight for joint custody. He could, theoretically, make Marina's life a legal hell, if he chose to. But the report also warned about the consequences. Late paternity cases are emotionally devastating for the minors involved, a specific section warned. It is strongly recommended to seek amicable resolution before any legal action, especially considering the age of the alleged daughter and the prolonged period without paternal contact. David abruptly closed the folder, rubbing his face with both hands. He hadn't slept well since Friday. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily, he saw Marina, he saw the 15 years he might have lost slipping away like sand between his fingers. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Claudia, his assistant for 7 years, entered carrying another cup of coffee and a worried expression she was trying to disguise with professionalism. She was a woman in her 40s, efficient and loyal, who knew David's moods better than he did at times. "Your coffee got cold," she said, replacing the old cup with the new one. "And you have a meeting with the engineering team in 15 minutes. The reports from the factory in Campinas have arrived." Campinas, David repeated, and then remembered. The sustainability audit they had commissioned was underway. And who was leading that audit? Marina Smith, sustainability consultant. His heart raced. "Claudia, bring me the complete project file for the audit. I want to review the consultants involved." Claudia raised an eyebrow slightly. David rarely got involved in operational details at this level, but merely nodded. "I'll bring it in 5 minutes." When she left, David stood up and walked to the panoramic window that dominated the entire wall opposite his desk. Down below, New York City buzzed, millions of people rushing to their commitments, each carrying their own dramas and secrets. From above, everything seemed so small, so manageable. But David knew it was an illusion. Some things couldn't be controlled, no matter how high you climbed. Claudia returned with a navy blue folder. "The project started 3 weeks ago. The lead consultant is Marina Smith, hired through the company Sustain Plus Consulting. She has excellent references, having worked with major companies like Natura and Votorantim. Her preliminary report has already identified 17 critical points in our supply chain that need immediate attention." David flipped through the file, looking for the professional profile section. There it was, a formal photo of Marina, probably taken 2 years ago, with her hair tied back, a serious and professional expression, wearing a navy blazer. But even in the lifeless corporate photo, he saw the determination in her eyes, that inner strength that had always fascinated and frustrated him in equal measure. 17 critical points, David murmured, reading the executive summary that Marina had written. Her analysis was brutal and honest, pointing out flaws that his own internal team had ignored or minimized. "She isn't afraid to speak uncomfortable truths." "Sir?" "Nothing, just thinking out loud." David closed the folder. "When is the next project follow-up meeting scheduled?" Claudia checked the schedule. On her tablet. "Friday, 10 o'clock, here in the office, meeting room 3. Friday, a day before the movie meeting. David nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "I want to attend this meeting. Put it on my calendar." Claudia couldn't completely hide her surprise. "Sir, you never attend the operational audit meetings. You usually just review the final reports." "Well, this time I want to participate. Sustainability is important. I want to hear directly from the consultant. He kept his voice neutral, professional, but inside, his heart was racing. 5 days. He would have to wait 5 days. To see Marina again, to have an opportunity to talk to her before Saturday, to try to understand what the hell had happened in the last 15 years. The meeting with the engineering team was torture. David participated mechanically, nodding at the right moments, asking pertinent questions, but his mind was completely elsewhere. When it finally ended, it was already past noon. Ethan had texted during the meeting, "Dad, I'm having lunch at John's house. Is that okay?" David replied, "Sure, have fun." At least the boy was starting to make friends, to have a social life beyond the supervised activities that Mrs. Beatrice constantly organized. David decided to have lunch alone, something he rarely did. He went down to a discreet Japanese restaurant in Soho, sat at the sushi bar, and ordered the tasting menu. As the chef prepared each piece with almost meditative precision, David watched without really seeing, his mind constantly returning to that night at the restaurant. He tried to remember exactly what he had said to Marina during that last discussion, 15 years ago. The specific words faded over time, but he remembered the feeling: anger, frustration, fear of fully committing, fear of becoming, like his own parents, cold and distant. And then that phrase about never wanting children, said more out of defense than real conviction. But had Marina really believed that was permanent? Had she thought he was serious? And when she discovered the pregnancy, why didn't she insist more on contacting him? Unless she had tried, and he, buried up to his neck in negotiations that would eventually save his company from bankruptcy at that critical moment, simply didn't see the attempts. David felt a chill run down his spine. It was possible. God, it was totally possible. He remembered. Those months after the separation, working 18 hours a day, constantly traveling, instructing Claudia to block all personal distractions so he could focus entirely on business. Was it possible that Marina had tried to contact him and Claudia, following his instructions to the letter, simply blocked everything? The possibility made him nauseous. The sushi, usually one of his favorite meals, lost its taste in his mouth. David paid the bill and returned to the office, but he couldn't concentrate. At 4 in the afternoon, he gave up and went home early, something he almost never did. Ethan still hadn't returned, and the apartment was too quiet, too empty. David walked through the immaculate rooms, really observing his space for the first time in a long while. Everything was expensive, tasteful, perfectly decorated by an interior designer who charged a fortune. But there was no life there. There were no photos in frames, no children's drawings on the fridge kept as mementos, no traces of clutter or real personality. It was a magazine apartment, beautiful but sterile. He thought of Marina's apartment, which he had only seen briefly when she opened the door on Friday night. Small, clearly old, but there were plants in the windows, books piled in corners, a colourful blanket thrown over the couch. There was life there, history, memories. David entered Ethan's room, something he did rarely. The boy was organized, almost obsessively, probably trying to please David with that impeccable order. But there were small signs of personality: astronomy posters on the walls, a collection of minerals on the shelf, books about quantum physics piled on the study table. On the desk, half hidden among school notebooks, David saw a printed photo. He picked it up, examining it. It was of Ethan and Lily, probably taken on Friday at the restaurant, a quick selfie. They were both genuinely smiling, Ethan with a sparkle in his eyes that David rarely saw. And Lily. Lily looked so happy, so comfortable in her own skin. David sat on his son's bed, still holding the photo. His children. Because that was how he began to think of them, even though officially he was only the father of one and possibly the father of the other. Ethan and Lily. They were not biological siblings, but they were clearly developing a real bond. And what would happen when the truth came to light? How would Ethan feel, discovering that his father had a biological daughter he had never mentioned? How would Lily react to knowing that the man she knew as Ethan's dad was actually her own father? David's phone rang, pulling him from the increasingly dark spirals of his thoughts. It was his mother. "David, dear, we need to talk," Mrs. Beatrice said without preamble, her voice carrying that commanding tone she always used. "About that meeting on Friday." David sighed. He knew this call would come eventually. "Mom, it's not a good time." "It's never a good time for you, David. But we need to discuss this family, the Smiths. I had them investigated a bit, just as a precaution, you understand. And I found out that the girl has no registered father. Her mother raised her alone. It's not exactly the kind of family I imagined for Ethan to associate with." David felt anger bubbling up. "First, Ethan doesn't need your approval to have friends. Second, Marina Smith is a respected and competent professional. Third, and most importantly, it's none of your business." There was a surprised silence on the other end. Mrs. Beatrice was not used to being confronted. "David Montgomery, I am your mother. It's my responsibility to protect this family from..." "From what, Mom? From honest, hard-working people? From women who raise children alone with dignity?" He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "You will stay away from Marina and Lily. You will not investigate them. You will not interfere. You will not do anything. Am I being absolutely clear?" "You're protecting this woman too much for someone you just met," Mrs. Beatrice said with that sharp voice she always used when she suspected something. "What aren't you telling me, David?" "It's none of your business," he repeated, more harshly this time. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He hung up before she could respond, something he had never done before. His hands trembled slightly. He loved his mother, but she was manipulative and controlling, always trying to orchestrate the lives of everyone around her to fit her vision of what was appropriate. David looked again at the photo of Ethan and Lily. No, he wouldn't let his mother destroy whatever was beginning to form there. Whatever happened with him and Marina, the teenagers at least deserved the chance to develop. That friendship without toxic interference. Ethan came home shortly after 6, excited and talkative, in a way David hadn't seen in months. "Dad, João has an amazing telescope. We were planning a stargazing session for the new moon. Can I go? It'll be at a cabin that his family has in upstate New York." "Of course you can," David replied, and saw his son's face light up with surprise and joy. "Really? You're not going to ask all the details? Who will be there? How long?" David felt that pang of guilt again. "I trust your judgment, Ethan. You're a responsible boy." Ethan stood there for a moment, as if he didn't know how to process that sudden trust. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot." They ordered Japanese food for dinner, one of the rare meals they had together during the week. And Ethan excitedly talked about school, the robotics project, about Lily and how she was helping him with some complex physics equations. "She's like a genius, Dad," Ethan said between bites of yakisoba, "but not in an arrogant way. She explains things in a way that makes everything make sense." "Sounds like she takes after her mother," David commented without thinking, and then froze, realizing what he had said. Ethan looked at him curiously. "You really knew Marina before, didn't you? It wasn't just work." David hesitated but decided on honesty, at least partially. "We dated, a long time ago. It was serious for a while, but it didn't work out. That's why you got weird at the restaurant." "Exactly." Ethan processed that for a moment. "It must be weird, seeing someone you dated after so long." "It's more than weird," David admitted. "It's complicated. Do you still like her? The question caught him off guard. David opened his mouth to give an automatic response, but stopped. Did he still have feelings for Marina? He honestly didn't know. There was anger, resentment for the lost years. But there was also that attraction that had never really died, that fascination with her strength and integrity. I don't know, he finally said honestly. A lot of time has passed. We're different people now. Ethan nodded, seeming to accept that. Lily is nice. I hope we can still be friends, regardless of what happens with you and her. Mom! I hope so too, David said, realizing he was speaking sincerely. Later, alone in his room, David grabbed his laptop and opened his personal email. He searched through the archives, going back 15 years. It took almost an hour, but he finally found it. 3 emails from Marina sent 2 weeks apart. The first was short. David, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please call me. The second, more desperate. David, I know you're busy, but this is really important. I need half an hour of your time, please. The third and final one, cold and resigned. I got your message. I won't bother you anymore. Take care. David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. She had tried. She really had tried. And he, blind and deaf to anything that wasn't work at that critical moment in his career, simply hadn't seen it. Or worse, Claudia had blocked her without him even knowing. He checked the records. The emails had never been marked as read in his system. They probably went to spam, or Claudia deleted them before they reached his main inbox, following his instructions to filter out anything that isn't urgent and business-related. David closed the laptop and buried his face in his hands. Guilt crushed him with physical weight. Marina had tried to reach out. She had tried 3 times, and he, in his arrogance and obsession with success, had been completely inaccessible. 15 years. He had lost 15 years of his daughter's life due to sheer negligence, not out of malice, not out of deliberate rejection, but by being so focused on building his empire that he had become completely blind to everything else. And now, how could he fix this? Was there even a way to fix it? David looked at the calendar on his phone. Friday was marked, meeting with Marina Smith, 10 a.m. And just below, movie with Ethan and Lily, 7 p.m. 4 days. In 4 days, he would have to face Marina professionally. And 1 day later, he would have to sit down with her and have the hardest conversation of his life. He wasn't prepared. There was no possible preparation for that, but he also knew he had no choice. The truth was there, impossible to ignore, demanding to be confronted. David lay down but knew he wouldn't sleep, not with the weight of guilt crushing his chest, not with the image of Marina desperately trying to contact him while he completely ignored her, not with the devastating realization that he was, in many ways, exactly the kind of absent and negligent father he had always sworn never to be. The clock on the bedside table read midnight when David finally closed his eyes, but his mind continued to race in tortuous circles, counting the days, the hours, the minutes, until everything changed irreversibly. The week dragged on, with torturous slowness for Marina, each day seeming to stretch into 48 hours, instead of 24. She dove into work with almost manic intensity, using reports and analyses as a shield against the thoughts that constantly haunted her. On Tuesday, she visited 2 factories in New Jersey, documenting irregularities in chemical waste disposal with a meticulousness that impressed even the most experienced technicians accompanying her. On Wednesday, while reviewing endless spreadsheets of energy consumption at her small desk in the apartment, Lily entered the room with a thoughtful expression that Marina recognized as a precursor to difficult questions. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Lily sat on the worn-out sofa, hugging a pillow, to her chest. Marina saved the file and turned her chair to face her daughter, her stomach already tightening with anticipatory anxiety. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "You and David, You dated, didn't you? Lily asked directly, without preamble. It wasn't just work, it was more than that. Marina felt the blood run cold in her veins. Why do you think that? Mom, I'm not blind. The way you two looked at each other in the restaurant, the tension in the air, the way you acted strange all week. Lily paused, biting her lower lip in a way that was eerily similar to a habit David had. And yesterday, I was organizing the hallway closet and found an old box at the back. It had photos of you with him. Marina closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. That damn box. She had kept it at the back of the closet for years, unable to throw it away, but also unable to look at it. Photos from a time that felt like it belonged to another life, another person. Did you go through my things? Marina asked, but her voice held no real anger, just exhaustion. I didn't go through them. I was organizing and the box fell, Lily defended herself, but there was guilt in her eyes. Mum, I just want to understand. You looked so happy in those photos. What happened? Marina stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where some children were playing ball under the orange glow of the streetlights. How to explain 15 years of decisions, mistakes, pride and circumstances in a conversation with a 14-year-old? We dated for 6 months, Marina finally said, still facing away from Lily. It was intense. He was different from what I expected. Smart, ambitious, but there was also a vulnerability in him that few people saw. And I was young, idealistic. I thought I could change the world, and that he would help me with that. But it didn't work out. No. Our families were very different. Our worlds were very different. His mother never accepted me, always made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. Marina felt the old bitterness tighten her throat. And David, he was scared of real commitment, scared of becoming like his own parents who were absent and cold. So, when things got too serious, he backed off, and I was too proud to beg him to stay. Do you still like him? Lily asked quietly. Marina turned, facing her daughter. I don't know. A lot of time has passed. We are completely different people now. But that story, that past, it will always be there. Lily studied her with those perceptive eyes that saw too much. There's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling me. Marina's heart raced. Why do you think that? Because I know you, Mom, and you're hiding something. Lily stood up, moving closer. Does it have to do with me, with who my father is? There it was. The question that Marina knew would eventually come, but it still caught her completely off guard. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she tell? How could she turn 15 years of silence into truth without destroying everything? Sweetheart, Marina began, her voice trembling, it's complicated, and I promise I will tell you everything. But I need a little more time to sort things out, to find the right words. Can you give me that time? Lily watched her for a long moment, and Marina saw frustration and understanding battling on her daughter's face. Finally, Lily sighed. Okay, but Mom, whatever it is, I deserve to know the truth. I'm not a child anymore. I know, and you will know, I promise. Marina pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I just need to sort a few things out first. But you will know everything, and I hope you understand why I made the choices I did. Lily returned the hug, but when she pulled away, there was a shadow of worry in her eyes. Promise you won't lie to me anymore? The word anymore cut Marina like a knife. I promise. But as Lily went back to her room, Marina knew that promise was about to be tested in ways she wasn't ready to face. Thursday dawned rainy. that thick and persistent March rain that turns New York City into a chaos of flooded streets and paralyzed traffic. Marina had a meeting scheduled for 3 in the afternoon with suppliers in Midtown Manhattan, but it was past 5 and she was still stuck in an Uber that barely moved on the FDR Drive. Her phone rang, unknown number. She hesitated before answering, always wary of calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Marina Smith? A professional, slightly cold female voice. Yes. Who is this? My name is Claudia. I'm the executive assistant to David Montgomery. I'm calling to confirm your attendance at the follow-up meeting for the audit project tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Marina felt her stomach churn. I didn't know that meeting was scheduled. I usually deal directly with the operations manager. Mr. Montgomery decided to attend this meeting personally, Claudia explained with that impersonal efficiency of someone who repeats information dozens of times a day. He is closely monitoring the sustainability project and would like to review the preliminary findings. Of course he would, Marina thought bitterly. He wanted a confrontation before Saturday, wanted to control the narrative, the situation. Typical of David, he always needed to be in charge. I'll be there, Marina said, keeping her voice professional despite the rising panic in her chest. Perfect. Meeting room 3, 23rd floor. Security will be notified of your arrival. Claudia paused. Oh, and do you need to bring any documents? Should I arrange for a visitor badge? I have the necessary documents, and I already have a visitor badge from previous inspections. Excellent. See you tomorrow, then. Marina hung up and leaned her head against the back seat of the Uber, closing her eyes. Tomorrow. She would have to see David tomorrow, in a professional setting, pretending it was just a business meeting when it would actually be the prelude to a conversation that would change everything. The rain continued to fall outside, and Marina watched the drops slide down the car window, thinking about how her life seemed to reflect that weather, murky, chaotic, impossible to control. When she finally got home, it was past 7. Lily was in the kitchen making instant noodles, still in her school uniform. Sorry, sweetheart, Marina said, dropping her soaked bag on the floor. The traffic was terrible. It's okay, Mum. I know how it is. Lily served the noodles into 2 bowls. I made enough for both of us. It's not gourmet, but it'll fill us up. They ate in relative silence, just the sound of the rain outside and the clinking of utensils against the bowls. Marina watched her daughter discreetly, memorizing her features, the way she tucked, her hair behind her ear when she concentrated, the curve of her profile. So many things of David in that face, so many similarities that now seemed glaring. Do you work tomorrow? Lily asked, interrupting Marina's thoughts. I have an important meeting in the morning, but I'm free in the afternoon. With David's company? Lily asked, a bit too casually. Marina froze. How do you know? You left some papers on the table. I saw his company logo. Lily shrugged. Must be weird working for your ex. I don't work for him, Marina corrected quickly, perhaps too defensively. I work for his company. There's a difference. I see. Lily didn't seem convinced. You're going to see each other tomorrow and then again on Saturday. Isn't that kind of intense? Marina sighed. It is. But it's complicated, Lily. Business and personal are mixing in a way I'd rather they didn't. Maybe you need to talk. Like really talk. Let's talk. Resolve what's been left unresolved. Lily spoke with a wisdom that sometimes made Marina forget she was talking to a teenager. Because you both seemed really tense at the restaurant, and it will continue to feel strange until you sort it out. When did you become so wise? Marina asked with a small smile. I've always been, Lily replied with a smile back. You just sometimes forget to pay attention. Later, after Lily went to bed, Marina stayed awake in the living room, surrounded by her notes and reports for the meeting the next day. She had found significant irregularities in the supply chain of David's companies, issues that would require considerable investment to fix. Normally, she would present these findings without hesitation, with that brutal honesty that was her trademark. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would be in front of David, needing to maintain professionalism when everything inside her would be screaming to confront him, to demand answers, to finally have the conversation they had avoided for 15 years. Marina opened her laptop and reread her report for the third time, ensuring that every word was precise, every piece of data verified, every conclusion backed by solid evidence. If she was going to be in that room tomorrow, it would be as the competent professional she was, not as the emotional ex-girlfriend or the defensive mother, at least not during the meeting. Her phone buzzed with a message. From Lily. "Mom, are you still awake? Stop working and go to sleep. Love you." Marina smiled, despite all the anxiety. "I will. Love you too, sweetheart." But she didn't go to sleep immediately. Instead, she went to the hallway closet and searched until she found the box Lily had mentioned. She opened it slowly, as if it were a bomb that could explode at any moment. Inside were the photos she hadn't looked at in years. Marina and David at Central Park, him with his arm around her, both laughing at something the camera didn't capture. Marina and David at a restaurant, toasting with wine glasses, their eyes locked on each other with the intensity of people in love. Marina and David on a beach, probably in Montauk during a weekend. They had escaped the city, both tanned and happy. There were also other things in the box. Movie tickets, a napkin where David had scribbled math equations to explain some concept she didn't understand, a smooth stone he had found on the beach and given to her, saying it was the most perfect stone that ever existed, almost as perfect as you. Marina held that stone now, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. She had kept all of this as relics of a time that would never return, unable to throw it away, but also unable to revisit it without pain. But now, with David back in her life, with the truth about to explode, those relics felt like evidence of a crime, proof of a love that existed, that produced a child, that was neglected and abandoned by both in different ways. Marina closed the box and put it back at the bottom of the closet. Tomorrow. She would deal with everything tomorrow. And on. Saturday, finally, they would have to stop running and face the truth that had been chasing them for 15 years. She finally went to bed at 2 in the morning. But even then, sleep took a while to arrive. And when it did, it was filled with confusing dreams where she was back at the restaurant again. But this time, when she looked at Lily, the girl had David's face. And when she looked at David, he had Lily's face, and she couldn't distinguish where one ended and the other began, as if they were the same person divided into two different forms. Marina woke up at 6 in the morning with her heart racing, cold sweat on her forehead, and the absolute certainty that the day about to begin would change everything irreversibly. There was no more delaying, no more running, no more hiding. The truth was coming, like a storm on the horizon, and all Marina could do was prepare for the impact and hope that when the dust settled, there would still be something left to save. Friday dawned with a clear and deceptively calm sky, as if the city didn't know that on this day. On the 23rd floor of a building on Wall Street, two lives were about to collide irreversibly. Marina woke up at 6 after a night of fragmented sleep and confusing nightmares. She took a long shower, letting the warm water massage her tense shoulders, trying to gather the armor of professionalism she would need for the coming hours. She chose her clothes carefully. Black dress pants, a white button-up shirt, a well-tailored grey blazer that a friend had given her years ago, and that she reserved for the most important meetings. No high heels. She wore comfortable black flats, practical. She pinned her hair in a flawless bun, applied only a discreet lipstick. In the mirror, she saw a professional, competent woman in control. The mask was perfect. Lily was still asleep when Marina left. She left a note on the fridge. "Dear, I'll be back for lunch. There's lasagna ready in the freezer if I'm late. Love you, Mom." Simple, everyday words, anchors of normalcy on a day that would be anything but normal. The traffic was surprisingly smooth that morning, and Marina arrived at the office building where David's companies were headquartered at 9:40. 20 minutes early. Enough time to compose herself, mentally review her main points, breathe. The building was imposing, all mirrored glass, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds in a way that made it seem like the building was floating. The lobby was spacious and luxurious, with Italian marble floors, tropical plants in enormous pots, and a reception area that looked like it came out of a design magazine. Everything screamed success, power, money. Marina announced herself at the reception, showed her visitor badge, and was directed to the elevators. The ride to the 23rd floor was too quick, or perhaps her heart was beating so fast that it distorted her perception of time. When the doors opened, she found herself in a spacious corridor with glass walls offering a panoramic view of New York City. The city stretched in every direction, an endless sea of buildings and streets. A woman in her 40s, elegant and efficient, approached immediately. "Marina Smith? I'm Claudia, Mr. Montgomery's assistant. Welcome." Marina shook the extended hand, noting the firm and professional grip. "Nice to meet you, Claudia. The meeting room is this way. Can I offer you coffee, water, or tea?" "Water, please." Claudia guided her through a corridor with more glass, more stunning views, until they reached a medium-sized meeting room. The table was made of dark, polished wood, surrounded by 10 ergonomic leather chairs. One entire wall was glass, providing that endless view of the city. There was a state-of-the-art projector, a retractable screen, and all the technological equipment anyone could need. "Mr. Montgomery will arrive in a few minutes," Claudia informed, placing a bottle of chilled mineral water and a glass in front of Marina. "The operations managers are also on their way." Marina nodded, opening her laptop and connecting it to the projector. Her hands were steady, controlled, even though inside she felt like she was falling apart. She opened her presentation, checked that all the slides were in order, and took a deep breath. The door opened, and 3 men entered. The managers she already knew from previous inspections. They greeted her with professional familiarity, commenting on the traffic, the weather, small talk filling the space as they waited. And then David entered. Marina felt his presence before she even saw him, as if the air in the room had changed density. She looked up, and there he was, imposing at the entrance of the room, wearing a perfectly tailored dark grey suit, a white shirt without a tie, his signature style of casual yet extremely expensive elegance. His hair was slicked back, with a few rebellious strands falling over his forehead. He wore glasses that Marina didn't remember him using before, giving him an even more intellectual, mature air. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, just enough time for Marina to see the contained storm there, the same tension she felt, but David looked away, almost immediately turning to the managers with a professional greeting. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his deep, controlled voice filling the room. "Thank you for being here. Shall we begin?" He sat at the head of the table, and Marina realized he had strategically positioned himself directly across from her, forcing them to face each other throughout the presentation. Intentional? Probably. Marina cleared her throat, activated the first slide, and began. Her voice came out firm, professional, each word measured. "Good morning. In the last 3 weeks, I conducted audits in 4 production units, interviewed 32 employees from different hierarchical levels, and analyzed approximately 2,000 documents related to the supply chain. What I found was both encouraging and concerning. She moved to the next slide, showing energy consumption graphs. The encouraging part first. Your units have energy efficiency 23% above the national average. The investment in solar panels is generating a return higher than projected. Solid waste management is well implemented. David watched attentively, occasionally taking notes on a tablet. His eyes were fixed on the screen, carefully avoiding looking directly at Marina, but she felt the tension radiating from him like heat from a radiator. Now, the concerning part. Marina moved to slides showing less favorable data. I discovered significant irregularities in your supply chain. 3 of your main raw material suppliers have a history of undisclosed environmental violations. One of them is discharging untreated industrial effluents into a tributary of the Hudson River. One of the managers shifted uncomfortably in his chair. David lifted his eyes from the screen, finally looking directly at Marina. Do you have concrete evidence of these allegations? I do. Marina held his gaze firmly. Photographic documentation, technical reports from environmental agencies, testimonies from local workers, everything is compiled in Appendix 6 of the detailed report I sent last night. And have you notified these suppliers about your findings? David asked, his voice measured but with a hint of challenge. It's not my role to notify them. My role is to notify you, my client, so you can take appropriate actions. Marina did not look away. The question, Mr. Montgomery, is, what does your company intend to do with this information? The tension in the room was palpable. The managers looked between David and Marina, clearly sensing that something more was happening beyond the apparent professional discussion. David leaned back in his chair, intertwining his fingers. Continue with the presentation. I want to see all the findings before we discuss actions, Marina continued, slide after slide, revealing issues in water management, chemical disposal, and working conditions in some outsourced facilities. She did not soften anything, did not mitigate the uncomfortable truths. It was her job to be brutally honest, and she did that job with the competence that had made her respected in the industry. But throughout the presentation, she was aware of David, how he absorbed every piece of information, asking pointed and intelligent questions, challenging some of her conclusions, but always professionally, never personally. She saw the brilliant businessman he had become, the evolution of the ambitious young man she had known 15 years ago. When she finally reached the last slide, a summary of the main recommendations, it was already past 11:30, an hour and a half of intense presentation. In summary, Marina concluded, her voice slightly hoarse from speaking, you have internal operational excellence, but significant vulnerabilities in the external chain. My recommendation is to implement a supplier audit program in 3. Raphael observed the final slide for a long moment. Then he turned to the managers. Gentlemen, can you give us a moment? I need to discuss a few issues with the consultant privately. The managers exchanged quick glances, clearly curious, but nodded and left silently. The door clicked shut, and suddenly Marina was alone with Raphael for the first time in 15 years. The silence in the room was deafening. Marina could hear her own heart beating, the distant sound of traffic below, the almost imperceptible hum of the air conditioning. Raphael slowly stood up, walked to the glass wall, turning his back to her as he gazed out at the city. Marina saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. You did an exceptional job, he finally said, his voice low and controlled, brutally honest, technically flawless, exactly what I expected from you. It's my job, Marina replied, closing her laptop with hands that were finally starting to tremble slightly. Yes, your job. Raphael turned to face her, and Marina saw that the professional mask had fallen away. In its place was anger, confusion, pain. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you alone. Marina stood up as well, crossing her arms defensively. I figured. I found the emails, Raphael said abruptly. The 3 you sent me 15 years ago, they went to spam, or my assistant blocked them. I never saw them. I never knew you were trying to contact me. Marina felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. You didn't know? No. I was in Singapore closing a deal that would save my company from bankruptcy. I instructed my assistant to block all personal distractions. I had no idea you were trying to tell me about... He paused, as if the word pregnancy was too big to say. About Lily, Marina finished for him, her voice coming out stronger than she expected. About your daughter. There it was. The truth finally spoken aloud, without euphemisms or half-measures. Raphael briefly closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Marina saw contained tears there. How can you be sure? How do you know she's mine? The eyes, Raphael. Look into her eyes. They are exactly like yours. And the birthmark on her eyebrow. And 1,000 other little things I see in her every day that remind me of you. Marina felt her own voice start to falter. And besides, you were the only man I was with during that time, there's no doubt. But I'm sterile, Raphael said, and there was desperation in his voice now. I had mumps when I was 8. The doctors said my chances of having biological children were practically 0. That's why Ethan is adopted. Marina froze. Sterile? But that doesn't make sense. Lily exists. She's here. I know. Raphael ran his hands through his hair, messing it up for the first time since Marina had known him. I know she exists. I saw her. I recognized her. But the doctors, they all said the same thing. The chances were astronomically low. But not impossible, Marina said softly, starting to understand. Low, but not 0. Not 0, Raphael agreed. And now there was something different in his voice. Admiration? Fear? Lily is a statistical miracle, something that shouldn't have happened, but did. They stood there, separated by 5 meters of polished wooden floor, but it could have been an ocean. 15 years of misunderstandings, of missed messages, of wrong assumptions, of pride and fear weighing between them. Why didn't you insist more? Raphael asked, and there was accusation in his voice now. 3 emails and you gave up. Why didn't you come to my office, shout until I heard, do whatever it took to tell me? I tried to go to your office, Marina shot back, defensiveness giving way to anger. I was stopped by security. I tried to schedule a meeting, and they told me your schedule was booked for months, and your emails went unanswered. What was the clear message there, Raphael? You said you never wanted children. I showed up pregnant. You ignored me. 2 + 2 is 4. You should have insisted more. Raphael raised his voice for the first time. And you should have been accessible, Marina shouted back, but you were too busy building your empire to care about what you left behind. The silence that followed was heavy with years of resentment and accumulated pain. They stared at each other, both breathing heavily, both with tears in their eyes that refused to fall. I lost 15 years, Raphael finally said, his voice broken. 15 years of her life, first steps, first words, first day of school, everything. You stole that from me. I didn't steal anything. Marina felt the tears finally streaming down her face. You made yourself inaccessible. I tried. And when you didn't respond, when it became clear you didn't want to know, I did what I had to do. I raised our daughter alone. I worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, sacrificed everything to give her a good life. So don't come accusing me of stealing something from you when you abandoned the possibility before even knowing she existed." Raphael opened his mouth to respond, but then stopped. He walked back to the window, resting his hands on the glass, his forehead pressed against the cold surface. Marina could see his breath fogging the glass, could see his shoulders trembling slightly. "You're right," he finally said, so quietly that Marina could barely hear. "I was inaccessible. I was obsessed with success, with proving something to my mother, to the world, to myself. And in that obsession, I lost what really mattered." He turned to face her. Again. "But you're right, too. I said I didn't want kids, and I said it out of pure fear. Fear of repeating my parents' mistakes, of being as absent and cold as they were with me. And look where that's led me. I have a wonderful adopted son, with whom I can barely connect because I don't know how to be the kind of father he needs." Marina wiped the tears from her face with the back of her hand. "And what do we do now, David? How do we fix 15 years of mistakes?" "I don't know," he admitted. And there was a vulnerability in him that Marina hadn't seen since those 6 months when they first met. "But I know that Lily needs to know the truth, and Ethan too. And then we'll see what's left after everything blows up." "She hates me," Marina whispered, expressing the fear that consumed her. "When she finds out I've hidden you from her whole life, she will hate me." "Maybe," David said honestly. "Or maybe she'll understand that 2 imperfect adults did the best they could with the information and circumstances they had." He paused. "Tomorrow at the movies, after the film, we sit down with them and tell them everything." "Tomorrow," Marina repeated, feeling the weight of that word. Less than 24 hours until the life they knew completely exploded. The door to the room suddenly opened, and Claudia entered with an apologetic expression. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Montgomery, but your noon meeting is waiting." David instantly composed himself, the professional mask returning to place with practiced ease. "Right. Claudia, schedule a follow-up meeting with consultant Smith for next week, and implement the priority recommendations she presented immediately." "Yes, sir." David looked at Marina one last time, and in that glance, there were so many unspoken things that words felt inadequate. "Tomorrow at 7, at the movie theater in the Mall of America. And Marina, thank you for the report and for Lily, for taking care of her all these years." Marina simply nodded, not trusting her voice to respond. She mechanically gathered her things, waved goodbye to Claudia with a silent gesture, and left the room. In the elevator, alone, she finally allowed the tears to fall freely. 15 years of secrets were about to crumble, and when the dust settled, Marina had no idea if there would still be anything left standing, or if everything she had so carefully built would be in ruins at her feet. Marina arrived home shortly after noon, emotionally and physically exhausted, as if she had run a marathon instead of just leading a business meeting. Her hands still trembled slightly as she inserted the key into the lock, and she had to take a deep breath 3 times before she could turn the doorknob and push the door open. Lily was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her laptop on her lap, probably doing some schoolwork. She looked up when Marina entered, and her face immediately filled with concern. "Mom, are you okay? You look—" Lily paused, searching for the right words. "You look like you've been hit by a truck." Marina tried to smile, but she knew the result probably looked more like a grimace. "Just tired, sweetheart. It was a tough meeting." "With David's company?" Lily asked, closing her laptop and giving Marina her full attention. It was that kind of focused and perceptive attention that made Marina simultaneously proud and nervous. Her daughter saw too much, understood too much, Yes. Marina let her bag drop to the floor and collapsed into the armchair, slipping off her flats and massaging her sore feet. I presented the audit results. They weren't all positive. He didn't like some of the things I found. But you were right, weren't you? Lily tilted her head, studying her mother with those dark brown eyes that were so similar to David's that Marina sometimes had to look away. You're always right when it comes to work. You don't lie. You don't sugarcoat things. That's why companies hire you. Yes, I was right. But sometimes being right is uncomfortable for everyone involved. Marina closed her eyes, resting her head against the couch. Sometimes the truth hurts, even when it's necessary. There was a long silence, and when Marina opened her eyes, Lily was watching her with a serious expression, older than her 14 years. Are we still talking? About work? Lily asked quietly. Or are we talking about other truths that hurt? Marina felt her heart tighten. Sweetheart, because I'm not stupid, Mom. Lily stood up, walking to the window and turning her back to Marina, just like David had done in the meeting room a few hours earlier. The similarity in posture made Marina feel a lump in her throat. I know something is going on. Something big. Something that involves you, David, and probably me. And it's driving me crazy, not knowing what it is. Marina stood up too, approaching her daughter but not touching her, giving her space. I promised I would tell you everything, and I will, but I need to do it the right way, at the right time. And when is the right time? Lily turned around, and there was frustration in her eyes now, and fear too. Because it seems like the longer it takes, the bigger the secret gets, and the bigger the secrets get, the more painful the truths are when they finally come out. Tomorrow, Marina heard herself say, before she really processed the decision. After the movies, tomorrow, we're going to have a talk, all of us. You, me, David, and Ethan, and you're going to know everything. Lily studied her for a long moment. It's about my dad, isn't it? David. He is my dad. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, made with the certainty of someone who had already connected all the dots on her own. Marina felt her legs weaken, and she had to lean on the arm of the chair. How did you know? The eyes, Lily said simply. When you look in the mirror, do you see what I see? I have his eyes, Mom. Exactly the same. And the birthmark on... Lily wiped a tear that had escaped. And the way you two looked at each other. It wasn't just tension from ex-lovers. It was something deeper. It was recognition. As if you shared a huge secret that no one else knew. Marina felt her own tears starting to fall. Lily, why didn't you ever tell me? Lily's voice broke. All those years, every time I asked about my dad, you said he didn't know I existed, that you had separated before. But he was there, Mom, there in New York City, all along. Why did you keep me away from him? Because I thought he didn't want to know. Marina finally let the words out, the weight of 15 years of pain and guilt falling with them. Because I tried to tell him when I found out I was pregnant. I tried 3 times and he never responded. Because he told me he never wanted kids, and I interpreted that silence as rejection. Because I was too proud to beg, and too scared that he would reject you too. But you didn't have the right to decide that for me. Lily raised her voice, tears streaming. Tears, freely now. I had the right to know him. To have a father. And even if he had rejected me, at least it would have been my rejection, my pain, my decision on how to deal with it. You're right, Marina said, her voice breaking. You are absolutely right. I made a mistake, a gigantic mistake that lasted 15 years. And I don't have good enough excuses to justify it, just weak explanations from a young and scared woman who made imperfect decisions with incomplete information. Lily let herself fall back onto the worn-out sofa, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs she was trying to contain. Marina hesitantly moved closer, sitting beside her, and when Lily didn't pull away, she pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," Marina whispered against her daughter's hair. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you, but I ended up hurting you in a completely different way." They stayed like that for long minutes. Mother and daughter embraced on the worn-out sofa of a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, crying for lost years and truths finally revealed. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, indifferent to the human drama unfolding in one of its millions of homes. Finally, Lily pulled away, wiping her face with the sleeve of her blouse. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was determination in them now. "Does he know? Does David know I'm his daughter?" "He suspects. Since that night at the restaurant, he saw you and recognized. This morning, at the meeting, we confirmed." Marina hesitated. "He didn't know, Lily. The emails I sent never reached him. He was traveling, focused on saving his company from bankruptcy, and he instructed them to block all personal distractions. He literally never saw my attempts to reach out." Lily processed that slowly. "So, he didn't reject me. He just never knew." "Exactly. And now that he knows." There was hope and fear mixed in Lily's voice. "What does he want?" "He wants to meet you, for real, as a father." Marina took her daughter's hands in hers. "But Lily, you need to understand. He isn't perfect. He has an adopted son, Ethan, and their relationship is complicated, distant. David doesn't know how to be the kind of loving and present father you deserve. He will make mistakes. He will frustrate you. He will disappoint you at times." "Like any father," Lily said, and there was a maturity in her voice that made Marina's heart ache. "You're not perfect either, Mom. You kept my father from me for 15 years. That hurts a lot, but I still love you. And I will forgive you eventually, because you are my mother and I know you did what you thought was best." "When did you become so wise?" Marina asked with a sad smile. "I've always been," Lily replied with a ghost of a smile. "You just weren't really paying attention." They prepared lunch together, a simple cheese omelette with toast, orange juice, and ate in relative silence, processing everything that had been said. Marina watched her daughter discreetly, seeing her with new eyes now that everything was out in the open. Lily seemed older all of a sudden, as if knowing the truth had added years to her maturity in a matter of hours. "And Ethan?" Lily asked suddenly between bites. "Is he going to be upset, with Dad having a biological daughter when he's adopted?" Marina hadn't thought of that, but it was a valid concern. "I don't know, dear. I think it will depend on how David handles the situation and how you and Ethan relate to each other." "I like him," Lily said softly. "Ethan. He's kind, smart, funny, in a shy way. Would it be weird if suddenly he was like my half-brother? Not biologically, but practically?" "It would be an unconventional family," Marina admitted. "But unconventional families can be just as good, sometimes better, than conventional ones." Lily nodded, pushing the remnants of the omelette around her plate. "I want to meet him, David, for real, not just as Ethan's dad. I want to know who he is, what he likes, how he thinks. I want—" She paused, emotion thickening her voice. "I want to have a father." Marina felt tears threatening to return, but she held them back. "And you will. Maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe not perfect, but you will have one." The rest of the day passed in a kind of silent truce. Lily retreated to her room to process everything, occasionally coming out to ask questions. "Does he like—" Marina was answering questions like, "What kind of music does he like? Does he play sports? Why did you two break up exactly?" And she responded as best as she could, painting an honest portrait of David, his virtues and flaws, his fears and ambitions, the complex man he was. In the evening, while preparing dinner, just spaghetti with marinara sauce, Something simple that didn't require much concentration. Marina received a message from an unknown number. She opened it with a racing heart. "Marina, this is David. I got your number from Claudia. Hope you don't mind. I wanted to confirm tomorrow, 7 p.m., AMC Theatre. After the movie, let's find a quiet place to talk together. Let's do this right. D." Marina typed back, "Confirmed, Lily already knows. She connected the dots on her own, so at least part of the conversation will be easier." The reply came almost immediately. "Damn. How is she?" "Hurt, confused, but stronger than I expected. She wants to meet you." There was a long pause before the next message. "I'm terrified." Marina stared at that confession of vulnerability for a long moment before responding, "Me too. Shall we do our best?" "It's all we can do." Another silence. And then, "Ethan doesn't know yet. I'll tell him tomorrow morning, before we head out to the movies. Good luck." "You too." Marina put her phone away and finished preparing dinner, but her mind was completely elsewhere. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. The masks would fall completely, secrets would be exposed, and 4 people, 2 adults and 2 teenagers, would have to figure out how to build something functional from the ruins of 15 years of misunderstandings. Lily showed up for dinner, and they ate together, this time with lighter conversations. Lily talked about a science project she was working on, about a school friend who was having problems with her parents, about a book she was reading, superficial normalcy, covering the storm that both knew was coming. "Mum," Lily said when they finished eating and were washing the dishes together in the tiny kitchen, "I'm still upset with you for hiding all this. I'm not ready to fully forgive yet." "I know, but I love you, and I know you love me, and we'll get through this, right?" Marina pulled her daughter into another tight hug. "We will. It may take time, but we will." That night, Marina lay in bed but couldn't sleep. Her mind was spinning in endless circles, imagining all the ways tomorrow's conversation could go, all the possible reactions from Ethan, all the complications that could arise. She grabbed her phone and, without thinking too much, typed a message to David. "Are you awake?" The reply came in seconds. "Yes, I can't turn my brain off." "Me neither. I'm terrified. Ethan is going to hate me. Lily is upset with me. Do we deserve this?" Marina thought about the question for a long moment before replying, "We deserve some consequences for our choices. But our kids don't deserve to pay for our mistakes, so tomorrow isn't about us. It's about them." "When did you become so wise?" "I think Lily is teaching me." Marina hesitated before typing the next message. "David, what if I had pushed harder? What if I had shown up at your office every day until you listened to me? Everything could have been different." The response took a little longer this time. "What if I hadn't been so obsessed with work? What if I had realized I was blocking you? What if I hadn't said those things about never wanting kids? We can torture ourselves with what-ifs forever, Marina. Or we can accept that 2 imperfect young adults made imperfect choices that led to an imperfect situation. And now, 15 years older and marginally wiser, we can try to do better." Marina felt tears burning her eyes. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not. I'm on my 3rd whiskey and contemplating all the ways I can screw this up tomorrow. That makes me feel better. Happy to help. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be long." "You too. Good night, David." "Good night, Marina." Marina set her phone aside and closed her eyes. But she knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Her mind was still racing, her heart still pounding, but there was something different now. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, they could get through this. Not without pain, not without complications, but get through it nonetheless. In the next room, Lily was also awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about a father she was about to truly meet for the first time, thinking about all the questions she wanted to ask, all the things she wanted to know, thinking about Ethan and what it would be like to have him as a sort of non-biological brother, thinking about how her life was about to change completely in a matter of hours. And on the other side of the city, in the luxury apartment in Manhattan, David was sitting in the dark living room, the glass of whiskey forgotten on the side table, staring at the door to Ethan's room and gathering the courage to have the hardest conversation of his life with his son. And Ethan, in his room, was also awake, sensing that something big was about to happen, that the world as he knew it was about to change fundamentally. 4 people in 3 different locations, all awake on the same Friday night, all waiting for the Saturday that would change everything irreversibly. The clock continued its relentless march, each second bringing them closer to the moment of truth. And somewhere in the universe, fate, or chance, or God, or whatever force governs these things, was watching and waiting to see what would happen when secrets finally became truths, when distance finally became closeness, when a fragmented family tried to become something new and undefined, but possibly, eventually, whole. Saturday dawned with a partly cloudy sky, the sun struggling to break through the thick clouds that promised rain by the end of the day. David woke up at 6 in the morning after only 3 hours of fragmented sleep, his body aching from tension and his mind still racing in anxious circles. He took a long shower, letting the warm water massage his tense muscles, but no amount of heat could dissolve the cold knot of anxiety in his stomach. At 7:30, he was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard the door to Ethan's room open. The boy appeared still in his pajamas, hair messy, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Dad? Are you okay? I never see you awake this early on a Saturday." Ethan poured himself some orange juice, watching David with growing curiosity. "And you look tense." David poured 2 cups of coffee, pushing one toward Ethan even though he knew the boy preferred hot chocolate, and sat down at the kitchen table. "Sit down, son. I need to talk to you about something important." Ethan's expression immediately shifted from sleepy to worried. He sat down slowly, hands around the coffee cup as if seeking warmth. "Is something going on? With the company? With Grandma?" "No, nothing like that. It's about—" David paused, searching for the right words and finding none that seemed adequate. "It's about Marina and Lily." Ethan straightened in his chair, fully awake now. "What about them?" "Do you remember I told you that Marina and I dated a long time ago?" David began, choosing each word carefully as if he were crossing a minefield. "It was 15 years ago. We broke up in a complicated way, with a lot of unresolved issues." "Yeah, I remember. You said it was serious." Ethan tilted his head, his perceptive green eyes studying his father. "But that was before you met my mom, before you adopted me." "Exactly. 6 months before, actually." David took a sip of the coffee, but it was too bitter, or maybe it was just the taste of the conversation he was about to have. "When Marina and I broke up, it was bad. We fought hard. I said things I shouldn't have said. And then I dove into work and cut off all contact with her." Ethan waited, clearly sensing that there was more to come, that this wasn't just a story about an old relationship. "What I didn't know at the time, what I didn't find out until last week, is that when Marina and I broke up, she was pregnant." David forced the words out, watching Ethan's face process the information. "She tried to tell me, tried to contact me 3 times, but I was traveling, obsessed with saving the company, and I instructed that all personal distractions be blocked. Her emails never reached me. I never knew." The silence that followed was heavy, thick. Ethan sat completely still, his eyes widening slowly as comprehension dawned. "Lily," Ethan finally said, his voice low and too controlled. "Lily is your daughter." Yes. David felt as if he were confessing a crime. In a way, perhaps he was. Biological. Although doctors told me years ago that I was sterile, that the chances of having biological children were close to zero. But Lily exists. So clearly it wasn't zero. It was just extremely unlikely. Ethan remained seated there, processing. David could see the storm of emotions crossing his son's face. Confusion, hurt, anger, more confusion. Finally, Ethan carefully set the coffee cup down on the table as if afraid he would break it if he used too much force. "So, you have a biological daughter," Ethan said, his voice still controlled, but with a hint of something that could be pain. "The thing you always said you couldn't have. The thing that made you adopt me, because it was your only option." "Ethan, it's not like that, isn't it?" Ethan interrupted him, and now there was definitely pain in his voice, mixed with anger. "You told me you adopted me because you loved the idea of being a dad, but couldn't have biological children, that I was unchosen, special. But now I find out you had a biological daughter all along, and you just didn't know because you were too busy to answer emails." "That's not fair," David began, but Ethan cut him off again. "What's not fair is you having a daughter you never told me about. What's not fair is me being your substitute son, while your real daughter was somewhere in New York City." Ethan's voice was rising now, years of bottled-up frustration finally finding an outlet. "You're not a substitute," David said firmly, reaching across the table, but Ethan pulled away. "Ethan, look at me. You're not and never have been a substitute for anything. I chose you, consciously, intentionally. Lily was an accident, a surprise, something I never planned and never knew existed." "But she is your biological daughter," Ethan insisted, and there were tears in the corners of his eyes now as he tried furiously to blink them back. "Blood of your blood, and I'm just the Korean boy you adopted because you thought you had no choice." "Stop." David stood up, walked around the table and knelt beside Ethan's chair, forcing the boy to look at him. "Stop this. Right now. You are my son. Period. There are no asterisks, no qualifiers. Biology doesn't define family, Ethan. What defines family is choice, commitment, love, and I chose you." "But you didn't choose Lily, and she is still your daughter," Ethan shot back, angrily wiping his eyes. "Yes, she is, and that doesn't change anything about you and me." David held Ethan's shoulders, forcing him to maintain eye contact. "Listen, I know this is a bombshell. I know it's confusing and scary, but Lily's existence doesn't diminish what you mean to me in any way. Do you understand? It's not a competition. You both are my children in different ways, but equally important." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. You're not even sure how to be a father to me. How are you going to be a father to two people?" The observation hit David like a punch to the stomach because it was true, brutally, painfully true. "You're right. I'm a terrible father to you. I'm distant, cold. I don't know how to show affection. I don't know how to give you what you need." David took a deep breath. "But I'm trying to improve, Ethan. And maybe this whole situation will force me to really learn. Because now it's not just about you and me. It's about you, me, Lily and Marina, and all of us trying to figure out how to make this work." Ethan studied him for a long moment, and David saw his son really see him, perhaps for the first time. All the flaws, all the insecurities, all the imperfections that David had always tried to hide behind success and control. "I like Lily," Ethan finally said softly. "She's nice, smart, funny. It would be weird if she suddenly became my—" "What? Half-sister?" Technically, no, since you don't share biology with me, David said honestly. But practically, she would be your sister in some undefined way that we still need to figure out what it means. And are we going to tell them today, Lily and Marina? Ethan asked. Lily already knows. She figured it out on her own, connected the dots. Marina texted me last night saying that Lily confronted her. David paused. So tonight, after the movie, we'll all sit down together and have this conversation openly. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing everything. Okay, but Dad, he looked directly into David's eyes, you promise this won't change anything between us, that you won't forget me now that you have a biological daughter. The fear in Ethan's voice broke David's heart into pieces. He pulled the boy into a tight embrace, something he did rarely, something Ethan clearly needed desperately. Never. I promise, Ethan. You are my son, and nothing will change that. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son embraced in the sunlit kitchen that had finally managed to break through the clouds. When they pulled away, both had red eyes, but there was an understanding between them that hadn't existed before. Now, David said, wiping his own face and trying to regain some composure, let's try to enjoy the movie before all the emotional intensity afterward, okay? Okay, Ethan agreed, and then added softly, thank you for telling me, instead of just letting me find out. Always, son, always. On the other side of the city in Brooklyn, Marina and Lily were having their own difficult morning. Lily had woken up early, filled with a nervous energy that made her pace around the tiny apartment. She changed her outfit 3 times, unable to decide what to wear for a meeting that was simultaneously casual, just a movie, and momentous, the first real meeting with her father. Sweetheart, you look beautiful in any of the options, Marina said for the 3rd time, watching Lily critically examine herself in the mirror. He will like you no matter what you're wearing. What if he doesn't? Lily turned away from the mirror, and there was pure vulnerability in her eyes. What if he really gets to know me and decides he doesn't want to be my father after all? Marina pulled her daughter to sit beside her on the worn-out sofa. That won't happen. I know David, I know his flaws, but I also know his heart. He won't reject you, Lily. If anything, he'll be just as nervous as you are right now. You think? I know. He texted me last night saying he was terrified. Lily gave a small smile. That makes me feel a little better. They spent the rest of the morning in a strange dance of forced normalcy, watching TV without really paying attention, preparing lunch and barely touching the food, talking about insignificant things, while carefully avoiding the giant elephant in the room that was the conversation they would have in a few hours. At 6 o'clock, Marina and Lily finally left the apartment. Marina had called an Uber. Her budget usually didn't allow luxuries like this, but today it felt appropriate. During the ride to the Mall of America, Lily remained quiet, looking out the window, and Marina respected her silence, knowing her daughter was processing, preparing herself. The Mall of America was busy for a Saturday night, entire families strolling through the brightly lit corridors, noisy groups of teenagers, couples holding hands. Marina and Lily arrived at the AMC theater at 10 to 7, and David and Ethan were already there, waiting near the ticket counter. The moment the 4 of them saw each other was strange, loaded with unspoken significance. David was dressed casually, dark jeans, a navy polo shirt, expensive but understated sneakers. Ethan wore a shirt with an astronomy print and jeans, hands in his pockets, defensive posture. "Hi," Lily said, her voice coming out sharper than usual. She cleared her throat. "Hi, Ethan. Hi, David." Marina noticed the hesitation, the way Lily didn't know how to address David. Mr. Montgomery was too formal. David felt strange. Dad was still impossible. "Hi, Lily," David replied. and Marina could see he was just as nervous as Lily, only better at hiding it. "Marina." He nodded to her, formal, careful. "David." "Ethan." Marina greeted both. Ethan and Lily exchanged glances, and something passed between them. A silent understanding that they were both about to have their lives turned upside down. But at least they had each other as allies in this mess. "We already bought the tickets," Ethan said, breaking the strange silence. 7:15 show. It's starting soon." They entered the theater in a strange formation. Ethan and Lily in front, whispering to each other, and David and Marina behind, keeping a careful distance from each other. Marina could feel the tension emanating from David in waves. She could see in the rigidity of his shoulders, in the way he kept his hands clenched into fists at his sides. They bought popcorn and sodas and entered the theater. The teenagers sat together in the middle, and David and Marina, after an uncomfortable hesitation, took the seats immediately behind them. Close enough to supervise, far enough to give privacy. The lights dimmed, the trailers began, and in the darkness of the cinema, Marina felt David lean slightly in her direction. "How is she?" he whispered, so low that Marina could barely hear. "Nervous, scared, hopeful," Marina replied in the same hushed tone. "And Ethan?" "Hurt, confused, but handling it better than I expected." "After the movie?" "There's a cafe on the 4th floor of the mall. Quiet, private. I've reserved a table in the back." "You thought of everything." "I'm trying." A pause. "Marina?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry. For everything. For not responding. For not being there. For 15 lost years." Marina felt tears burning her eyes, grateful for the darkness that hid them. "Me too. For not insisting more, for being too proud, for keeping Lily away from you." They fell silent after that, pretending to watch the trailers, but both completely consumed by what was to come. In front of them, Ethan and Lily shared popcorn, occasionally commenting on the trailers in whispers, a genuine friendship forming despite, or perhaps because of, the insane circumstances that had brought them together. The movie finally started. Something about time travel and paradoxes, appropriately ironic given that everyone in line was trapped in their own temporal paradoxes of past decisions affecting unknown futures. Marina tried to focus on the screen, but it was impossible. Her mind kept jumping to the conversation they would have in 2 hours, imagining all the ways it could unfold, all the things that needed to be said. Beside her, David was equally distracted. She could feel him shifting restlessly in his seat, changing positions every few minutes. At one point, his hand slipped from the armrest and almost brushed against hers. They both recoiled as if burned. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Later, when the credits began to roll, the four emerged from the theater back into the bright light of the mall. Ethan and Lily were animatedly discussing the movie, analyzing the plot twists, debating theories. "That cafe you mentioned?" Marina said softly to David as the teenagers walked ahead. 4th floor, table 23 in the back. David took a deep breath. "Are you ready?" "No, but I don't think I'll ever be." "Me neither." They headed for the elevator, the four of them together, but each lost in their own anxious thoughts. When the elevator doors closed, Marina instinctively took Lily's hand. David placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder, small gestures of comfort, anchors before the storm. The elevator ascended slowly, each floor seeming to take an eternity. And when the doors finally opened on the 4th floor, it felt as if they were stepping into completely new territory, a place where secrets would become truths, where fragmented families would try to become something new and undefined, where four people would try to find a way through 15 years of mistakes and misunderstandings. The cafe was quiet, a few customers scattered among the tables. The waiter guided them to table 23. Tucked away in a corner with plants that created a sense of privacy. They sat down, Ethan and Lily on one side, David and Marina on the other, as if they were about to negotiate a peace treaty after a long and complicated war. And in a sense, that was exactly what they were about to do. Table 23 was strategically positioned in a corner of the cafe, surrounded by ornamental plants that created a bubble of privacy amid the discreet buzz of the mall. The lighting was soft, amber, coming from pendant lamps that looked like small moons suspended over each table. The smell of fresh coffee and freshly baked cakes lingered in the air, but none of the four sitting there seemed particularly interested in food. The waiter approached with menus, but David politely dismissed him. 2 coffees, 1 hot chocolate, and 1 chamomile tea, please. And that lemon meringue pie, 4 slices. He looked at the others. Unless someone wants something else. They all shook their heads negatively, too caught up in their own anxieties to care about what they would consume. The waiter nodded and discreetly stepped away, clearly sensing the tension at the table and having the wisdom not to linger. There was a heavy silence, no one wanting to be the first to speak, as if whoever initiated the conversation would be opening a Pandora's box that could never be closed again. Lily stared at her hands intertwined on the table. Ethan fiddled with the paper napkin, folding and unfolding the corners. Marina breathed slowly and deliberately, trying to control the panic that threatened to choke her throat. David observed them all, his expression controlled, but his eyes betraying the inner storm. Finally, it was Lily who broke the silence. She lifted her head, looking directly at David with those dark brown eyes that were identical to his, and asked in a voice that only trembled slightly, "Are you my father?" The question hung in the air between them, simple yet devastating in its direct honesty. David glanced quickly at Marina, as if seeking permission, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. He turned his attention back to Lily, leaning slightly forward, his hands on the table, open, vulnerable. "Yes," he replied, his voice hoarse but firm. "I am." Lily nodded slowly, as if that confirmation, even already knowing, even having connected all the dots, still carried an immense weight. "And you didn't know? All these years, you really didn't know I existed?" "I didn't know." David kept his gaze fixed on her. "Your mother tried to tell me." Lily discovered she was pregnant 3 times. She sent 3 emails. I never saw them. I was traveling to Singapore, closing a critical deal that would save my company from bankruptcy. I had instructed my assistant to block all personal distractions so I could focus entirely on work. He paused, the guilt evident in every word. I was so obsessed with professional success that I became completely inaccessible, and, in that, I lost the first 15 years of your life. But why didn't my mother try harder? Lily turned to Marina now, frustration in her voice mixed with a need to understand. Why did you give up after just 3 attempts? Marina took a deep breath, preparing for the brutal honesty that this conversation required. Because I interpreted his silence as an answer, Lily. Because in our last conversation before we broke up, he had said he never wanted to have children, that he was afraid of repeating his own parents' mistakes. So when I found out I was impregnant and he didn't respond to my attempts to reach out, I assumed it was deliberate rejection, and I was too proud, stupidly proud, to beg. So you both basically failed to communicate, and I paid the price, Lily said, and there was no accusation in her voice, just a deep sadness. I grew up without a father because you both were too young and too proud to try more than that. The observation cut through Marina and David like shards of glass. It was the raw, unvarnished truth without any softening. Yes, Marina admitted, tears beginning to streamed down her face. "And I am so sorry, Lily, more than I can express. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the best for you by raising you alone without involving a father who didn't want to be present. But what I was really doing was depriving you of knowing the other half of your story, your family, yourself." The waiter returned at that moment with the tray, placing the drinks and slices of pie on the table with silent efficiency before disappearing again. No one touched anything. "And you?" Lily looked at David again. "If you had known from the beginning, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Would you have been a present father? Or would you have rejected me because, as you said, you didn't want children?" David leaned back in his chair, running his hands over his face. When he spoke, his voice was laden with contained emotion. "Honestly, I don't know. I was 27, obsessed with building an empire, proving something to my controlling mother and to myself. I was afraid of fatherhood, afraid of failing, like my own parents failed with me. I can tell you what I would like to think I would have done, that I would have taken responsibility, that I would have been present, that I would have loved you from day one." He paused, meeting Lily's eyes. "But I can't guarantee that because I never had the chance to make those choices, and that's another layer of the whole tragedy." Ethan, who had been quiet until that moment, finally spoke. His voice was low but firm. "Lily, I know this is horrible for you, growing up without knowing your father when he was here all along, but at least you are truly his, biologically. I am just the kid he adopted because he thought he couldn't have his own children." "Ethan, no," David began, but Lily interrupted him. "Wait, what?" Lily looked between Ethan and David, confusion crossing her face. "You think it's less important because you're adopted, isn't it?" Ethan replied, and there was an old pain in his voice that clearly had been building for years. "He had you by accident, something he didn't even know was possible, and you are truly his. I'm just the backup plan." "You are not a backup plan," David said firmly, turning fully to Ethan. "Ethan, look at me. You are not and never were second choice. I chose you, consciously, intentionally. That doesn't make you any less my son." "But she carries your genes," Ethan insisted, tears finally escaping despite his efforts to hold them back. "She has your eyes, your birthmark, probably your quirks and way of thinking. And I have none of that. I never will." Marina, watching that boy break down in front of her, felt her heart tighten. She leaned forward, speaking directly to Ethan. "Can I say something, as someone who raised a biological daughter alone?" Ethan looked at her, surprised, but nodded. "Biology is an accident, Ethan. It's just genetics, chemistry, a DNA lottery. It doesn't mean anything about love, about choice, about real family." Marina took Lily's hand across the table. "I love Lily more than my own life, but it's not because we share DNA. It's because I choose to love her every day. I choose to wake up early when she's sick. I choose to sacrifice my dreams so she can pursue hers. I choose to be present even when it's hard, even when I'm exhausted, even when I don't know what I'm doing." She looked at David. "And from what I've seen, from what Lily tells me about you and Ethan, that's exactly what you do too. You choose to be his father, and choice, conscious, intentional choice, is worth infinitely more than any genetic coincidence." There was silence as everyone processed those words. Lily was looking at Marina with something that could be admiration or surprise at seeing her mother defend David's son so passionately. "She's right, Ethan," Lily said softly. "I spent 15 years without a father. And you know what I always wished for when I saw families with present fathers? It wasn't to have someone who looked like me. It was to have someone who chose to be there. Someone who came to school events, who helped with homework, who cared." She looked at David. "Do you do that for Ethan? Are you present for him?" David opened his mouth to respond, but then stopped. Honesty. This conversation demanded brutal honesty. Not as much as I should, not in the way he needs. I am distant, formal, better at providing financially than emotionally. I am... He looked at Ethan. Pure vulnerability in his eyes. I am exactly the kind of father I swore I would never be, and that terrifies me every day. At least you admit it, Ethan said softly. Most parents don't even realize. Admitting isn't enough, David replied. I need to do better, for you and now for Lily too. How? Ethan challenged. How are you going to do better when you don't even know how to do it right in the first place? I learn, David said simply. I make mistakes, apologize, try again, and I keep doing that until I get it right. He looked at Marina, maybe with help from someone who clearly knows how to be a good parent, even doing it alone. Marina felt a lump in her throat. I'm not perfect, David. I kept you from Lily for 15 years. That's not exactly a badge of good parenting. But you were there, Lily interjected. Every day, for everything. You weren't perfect, but you were present, and that counts for a lot. They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ethan picked up his mug of hot chocolate, taking a sip before speaking again. So, what happens now? He asked. You two are going to... What? Get married? Share custody of Lily? We're all going to be one big weird family. I don't know, David admitted. That's something we all need to figure out together. There's no manual for this situation. I don't want to lose my mom, Lily said suddenly, gripping Marina's hand tightly. No matter what happens, no matter what agreement you two make, I'm not going to be taken away from my mom. No one is going to take you away from anyone, David said firmly. Lily, I don't want to steal you from the life you have. I want to be added to it if you let me. I want to get to know you, understand who you are, be present from now on. But on your terms, at your pace. And what about money? Ethan asked abruptly. Because you're a billionaire, Dad. You're going to want to give everything to Lily now. Better school, better house, everything money can buy. And will Marina accept that? All eyes turned to Marina. She sighed deeply, picking up her chamomile tea just to have something to hold. No, she finally said. I won't accept charity. I built a life for Lily with what I earn honestly. It's not luxurious, but it's ours, earned with hard work and dignity, and I won't give that up. Not even if it meant a better life for Lily? David asked, and there was a challenge in his voice. Not even if it could pay for better universities, better opportunities? No, not even then, Marina replied, her own tone hardening. Because those things come with strings attached, David. They come with expectations, with control, with unequal power over our daughter's life decisions. Our daughter, David repeated, testing the words. Do you realize this is the first time you've said that? Our daughter. Marina blinked, realizing he was right. For 15 years, it had always been my daughter. The possessive pronoun had been solely hers. Sharing it felt strange, frightening, but also, perhaps, necessary. Okay, Lily interrupted, clearly sensing the tension rising. Let's do this. Can you stop discussing me as if I'm not here? I'm 14, not a little kid. I can have a say in my own life. You're right, Marina and David said simultaneously, then exchanged surprised glances. So, Lily, David said, turning all his attention to her. What do you want? How do you imagine this working? Lily was quiet for a moment, clearly organizing her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was steady, mature beyond her years. I want to get to know you. For real. Not as Ethan's dad or the billionaire from the company or any other label, just as you. Who is David Montgomery when he's not wearing a mask? She paused. And I want you to... She pointed at Marina and David. To resolve your differences without using me as a bargaining chip or battleground. You messed up 15 years ago. That's okay. But don't keep messing up out of stubbornness or pride now. When did you get so wise? David asked, echoing the same words Marina had said days earlier. I've always been, Lily replied with a small smile. You're just finally paying attention. Ethan let out a low laugh, the first one all night. She got you, Dad. Yeah, David admitted with a genuine smile. She really did. The tension at the table seemed to have eased slightly, but there were still so many unresolved questions, so many practical details to discuss. Marina picked up a fork, cutting a piece of the pie that had cooled, more as a way to have something to do than from real hunger. There are practical things we need to discuss, David said, returning to the business mode that was his comfort zone. Legal issues, official paternity test, possible changes to Lily's birth certificate. Paternity test? Marina interrupted. Do you really think that's necessary? Look at her, David. Look into her eyes. It's not about doubt, David explained patiently. It's about having legal documentation. If something happens to me, Lily needs to be recognized as my heir. She needs to have legal rights, and for that we need official documentation. Heir, Marina repeated, feeling the weight of the word. You're thinking about a will, about money. I'm thinking about protecting our daughter, David corrected. And yes, that includes ensuring she has financial security. It's not about control, Marina. It's about responsibility. Marina wanted to argue more, wanted to maintain her barriers of independence, but a part of her, the practical part that always put Lily's needs above her own pride, knew he was right. All right, she conceded reluctantly. Parenthood test, legal documentation. But David, I swear, if you try to use this to gain more control over her life decisions, I'm not going to, he interrupted her. Marina, I know you don't trust me. Why would you, after everything? But I'm asking you to at least give me the chance to prove that I'm not the enemy here. You're right, I don't trust you, Marina said honestly, but I'm willing to try. For Lily. For Lily, David agreed. Ethan watched the interaction with keen attention. You both realize that you're going to have to learn to really work together, right? Like talk without fighting, make decisions together, all that co-parenting stuff? We're not very good at that, Marina admitted. Not at all, David agreed. But we will learn. And me? Ethan suddenly asked. Where do I fit into all this? Am I just the adopted brother watching from the sidelines? Lily turned to him immediately. You're not just anything, Ethan. You are my friend first, and maybe my brother in some strange, unconventional way. And I hope you continue to be both. Even with everything getting complicated, Ethan asked vulnerably. Especially with everything getting complicated, Lily replied, because at least we understand what the other is going through. Ethan nodded slowly, and something between them, a bond, an understanding, solidified in that moment. They were two teenagers caught in the whirlwind of adult decisions, but they had each other as an anchor. So, Marina said, glancing at the clock and realizing it was already past 10 at night, what's the next step? Literally, what do we do tomorrow? David thought for a moment. Tomorrow I'll call my lawyer, schedule the paternity test for this week. In the meantime, maybe we can meet a few times. Dinner, coffee, something casual where Lily and I can talk. Get to know each other? And Ethan too, Lily quickly added. It's not just about you and me, it's about all of us. And Ethan too, David agreed, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. Marina nodded. Okay, but slowly, David. At her pace, not yours. At her pace, he agreed. They finally started eating the cold pie and drinking the warm beverages, the conversation gradually shifting to less intense topics. Ethan talked about the school robotics project. Lily spoke about her science work. Marina mentioned a new contract she had secured. David shared about the new factory being built. Upstate. It was forced, strange, but it was a start. 4 people trying to figure out how to become something resembling a family, even if it was a completely unconventional family outside any traditional definition. When they finally stood up to leave, it was already past 11. The mall was nearly empty, just a few night shoppers and employees closing the stores. David insisted on paying the entire bill, and Marina let him this time, choosing her battles. At the exit, there was an awkward moment of farewell. How did they say goodbye? With hugs, handshakes, distant waves? Lily resolved the issue by hugging Ethan tightly. "Thank you for being cool about all this," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thanks for not being weird with me for being adopted," Ethan whispered back. When they pulled away, Lily turned to David. There was a hesitation, and then she extended her hand for a formal handshake. David looked at the outstretched hand, something passing over his face, perhaps disappointment, perhaps understanding that closeness would take time. He took her hand, shaking it firmly but gently. "It was a pleasure to really meet you, Lily. Officially. You too, Dad." The word came out hesitantly, experimentally, and Marina saw David swallow hard emotionally. Marina and David exchanged glances, the weight of 15 years and the conversations they still needed to have passing between them silently. But not today. Today had already been emotional enough. "Monday," David said. "I'll text you about the next steps." "Monday," Marina agreed. And then they parted, Marina and Lily heading toward the waiting Uber. David and Ethan heading to the parking lot where the Tesla was. 2 pairs, 4 lives, all irrevocably changed by the truth that had finally been exposed. In the Uber, Lily rested her head on Marina's shoulder, exhausted. "Mom." "Yes, dear. That was intense." "Yes, it was. But I think it will be okay. Eventually." Marina kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I think so too. Eventually." And as New York City passed by the windows, its endless lights, its familiar streets, its chaotic life, Marina allowed herself to believe for the first time in 15 years that maybe the future could be different from the past. Not perfect, never perfect, but possibly eventually good enough. The following months unfolded like a complex choreography, where 4 people learned new steps while dancing, occasionally stumbling, but never completely giving up. April arrived, bringing the spring weather, those cool mornings giving way to warm afternoons, the unstable climate perfectly mirroring the transitional lives of Marina, David, Lily, and Ethan. The paternity test was conducted on a rainy Tuesday in April at a discreet clinic on the Upper East Side. Marina held Lily's hand throughout the process, even though it was just a simple saliva collection. The result came 5 days later. 99.9% probability of paternity. Cold numbers on a piece of paper confirming what everyone already knew, but somehow making everything more real, more definitive. David had hired the best family lawyer in New York City to handle the paperwork. Amendment to the birth certificate, shared custody issues, which Marina reluctantly agreed to consider, documents to include Lily in his will and health plan. Each signed paper was like a brick being placed in the construction of this new, strange family structure. But the real challenges were not in the legal documents. They were in the weekly dinners that became a tradition on Thursdays. In the evenings, the 4 of them gathered in increasingly less sophisticated restaurants, as David learned that Marina rejected ostentation. They were in the difficult conversations about Lily's education, where Marina and David discovered they had completely different philosophies. She valued independence and natural consequences, while he tended toward control and excessive protection. In May, during one of those dinners at a simple pizzeria in Brooklyn, Ethan finally exploded. They were discussing a school trip for Lily to a science camp in upstate New York, and David was hesitant about safety, wanting to hire private security to discreetly accompany her. "Dad, stop!" Ethan suddenly shouted, freezing everyone at the table. "You've been doing the same thing to me for years, and now you're going to start with Lily too. This suffocating control, this need to protect her from everything, it doesn't work. It just makes us feel like prisoners." The restaurant fell momentarily silent, other customers curiously looking at the table. David turned red, part embarrassment, part defensive anger, but then Marina placed her hand on his arm gently, and when he looked at her, he saw understanding, not judgment. "He's right," Marina said softly, "and you know it." David looked at Ethan, really looked, and saw his son, not the obedient boy trying to please, but the frustrated teenager who desperately needed space to breathe. Then he looked at Lily, who was watching everything with those perceptive eyes, waiting to see what kind of father he would choose to be. "You're right," David finally admitted, the words coming out with difficulty, but genuinely. "Ethan, you're right. And Lily, you can go to the camp. No private security, no secret GPS trackers, none of that. Just text me once in a while to let me know you're alive." Lily smiled, and it was a genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "I can do that." It was a small moment, but significant. David learning to loosen the reins, to trust, to accept that he couldn't control everything. It was a work in progress, and he would slip many more times, but at least he was trying. June brought Ethan's birthday, 17 years old. For the first time, the celebration wasn't just David and Grandma Beatrice at a formal and lifeless dinner. It was a surprise party organized by Lily, with reluctant but increasingly enthusiastic help from Marina. They transformed Marina's apartment in Brooklyn, because Ethan had casually mentioned he preferred places with soul to David's sterile apartment, into a genuine celebration with school friends, astronomy-themed decorations, and a homemade cake that Marina and Lily made together. When Ethan arrived and saw everyone there, his school friends, Lily beaming, Marina wearing a ridiculous party hat, and even David in jeans instead of his usual suit, he started to cry. Not tears of sadness, but pure joy at finally, for the first time in his life, feeling like he had a real family. David watched from a corner, drinking beer, bottle beer, not expensive wine, and chatting with his son's teenage friends about video games and quantum physics, completely out of his comfort zone, but trying, really trying. Marina approached him at one point, offering a new beer. "You're doing well," she said, a rare acknowledgement. "I feel completely out of place," David admitted, but he was smiling. "But look at him, Marina. Look how happy he is." They watched Ethan together, surrounded by friends, laughing at something Lily had said. And in that moment, despite all their differences, despite all the complicated history, Marina and David shared something, genuine pride in their children. "We did something right," Marina said softly. "Eventually," David agreed, "after doing a lot wrong first. But not everything was beautiful. Moments and linear progress." July brought the first major crisis. Mrs. Beatrice found out about Lily. David's mother had been strangely absent for the past few months, busy with international trips and social events. But when she finally returned and discovered, through gossip from the elite circles that had seen David dining repeatedly with a woman and 2 children, that her son had a secret daughter with that woman she had never approved, the explosion was nuclear. She stormed into David's office on a stormy Tuesday, invading his room in a controlled fury that was more frightening than any scream. "You have an illegitimate child," she said coldly, each word chosen to hurt, "with that common woman who was never good enough for our family, and you didn't tell me." David slowly rose from his chair, and there was a coldness in his eyes that Marina would recognize, the same coldness he used in tough negotiations. "Choose your next words very carefully, Mother, because Lily is not an illegitimate child. She is my daughter, and Marina is not common. She is a respected professional who raised our daughter alone while I was too busy being the perfect son you always demanded." "I demanded excellence," Mrs. Beatrice retorted, her voice rising. "I raised you to be someone, not to lower yourself with—" "Leave." David interrupted her, his voice low, but with an authority that brooked no argument. "Get out of my office now, and don't come back until you're ready to treat Lily and Marina with the respect they deserve." Mrs. Beatrice looked at her son as if she didn't recognize him. "Are you kicking me out because of that woman and that child?" "I'm kicking you out because you're disrespecting my daughter," David corrected. "And Mother, this is non-negotiable. You accept Lily as your granddaughter, you treat Marina with civility, or you choose not to be part of our lives. Simple as that." It was the first time in his life that David had truly confronted his mother, setting firm boundaries, and it came at a cost. Mrs. Beatrice left that office and didn't speak to him for 6 weeks. Ethan was caught in the middle, loving his grandmother, but also seeing for the first time how she was. Marina was manipulative and controlling. She learned about the fight through David, who called her that night visibly shaken. She invited him for coffee the next day, just the two of them, without the kids. They met at a small bakery in Brooklyn, far from the sophisticated places David usually frequented. "You did the right thing," Marina said after hearing the whole story. "It doesn't feel right," David replied, stirring his coffee without really drinking it. "She's my mother, Marina, and I basically chose you and Lily over her." "You didn't choose between people," Marina gently corrected. "You chose between acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. There's a difference." David looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in months there was something different in his gaze. Not just forced co-parenting or polite cooperation, something deeper, more frightening. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you maintain your principles without becoming hard? How are you strong yet still kind?" Marina laughed without humor. "You think I'm kind? David, I hid your daughter from you for 15 years. There's nothing kind about that." "You did what you thought was right with the information you had," David said, echoing words that had become a mantra in recent months. "None of us are perfect, Marina. We're just doing the best we can." There was a moment there, sitting in that simple bakery smelling of fresh bread, where something changed between them. Not romantic love. That would be too complicated, too quick, possibly even destructive, but genuine respect, and perhaps the beginning of something that could eventually become real friendship. August brought different challenges. Lily began attending therapy. Marina had insisted, saying that processing everything that had happened required professional help. David immediately agreed, offering to pay. Marina accepted, choosing her battles, but insisted on being involved in the choice of therapist. During one of those sessions, which Lily allowed Marina and David to attend together, the therapist had suggested some family sessions. Lily finally expressed the pain she had been holding back. "I love you both," she said, tears streaming down her face, "but I'm angry. So angry at you both. I lost 15 years with my dad, 15 years of hugs, of advice, of having someone to carry me when I was little. And it wasn't exactly anyone's fault, but it was also both of yours, and I don't know how to fully forgive that." The therapist, a 50-year-old woman named Dr. Helen, looked at Marina and David. "How do you feel hearing this?" Marina was openly crying. "I feel guilty, devastated, because she's right. And there's nothing I can do to give those years back." David was more composed, but his voice was hoarse. "I feel broken, knowing that my daughter grew up without me, And that part of it was because I was so obsessed with work that I became inaccessible. And you're right, Lily. You have every right to be angry." "But I don't want to be angry forever," Lily sobbed. "I want to move on. I want to have you both in my life from now on. I just need you to understand that it will take time, that some days I'll be okay and other days I'll look at normal families and feel envy and anger again." "We understand," Marina and David said in unison. "And one more thing," Lily wiped her face, looking directly at David. "I need you to stop trying to make up for the lost years by buying things. I don't need the latest iPhone or expensive clothes or anything else. I just need your time, your presence, you really getting to know me." David nodded slowly. "Okay, time and presence, I can do that." And he tried. He really tried. David began showing up at Lily's school events, science fairs, presentations, even volleyball games where Lily was a bench warmer and barely played. He learned to ask about her day without turning it into an interrogation. He learned to listen without trying to solve all the problems immediately. It wasn't perfect. He still slipped into his controlling patterns occasionally. But he was trying, and Lily saw that, and that mattered. Ethan was also in therapy, processing his own feelings about having a biological half-sister, but practically a half-sibling, and about his relationship with David. And slowly, very slowly, the dynamic between him and David began to change as well. David learned to ask for Ethan's opinion instead of just giving orders. Ethan learned to express his needs instead of just passively accepting everything. September marked 6 months since that first night at the restaurant. Marina suggested an anniversary dinner, celebrating half a year of this blended family they had built. This time, it was at David's apartment, which had slowly started to gain personality under the influence of Ethan and Lily. There were now pictures on the walls, not professional photos, but selfies and casual snapshots. There were plants brought by Marina in the windows. There were books scattered, left by Lily, on the coffee table. The apartment was still luxurious, but it was starting to feel like a real home. They cooked together, a lasagna that got a bit burnt on the edges, but was delicious nonetheless. They laughed when David confused salt with sugar in the sauce. Ethan took pictures of everything, documenting this new family finding its rhythm. After dinner, sitting in the living room with dessert and coffee, Lily raised her glass of juice. "I wanted to make a toast." Everyone raised their glasses. Marina with red wine, David with whiskey, Ethan with soda. 6 months ago, Lily began, her voice steady, I found out I had a dad, and it wasn't easy. It was confusing and painful, and sometimes I'm still angry. But also, she looked around the room at each of them. I also gained a family. Not the perfect family, not the family I imagined when I was little, but a real family with all the imperfections and complications that means. "And I got a brother," she continued, looking at Ethan with genuine affection. "A brother who understands what it's like to be a teenager in the midst of all this craziness." "I got a sister," Ethan added, raising his glass higher. "And I learned that family has nothing to do with DNA." Marina discreetly wiped her eyes. "I got help. After 15 years of doing everything alone, I have someone to share the tough decisions with. We still argue about everything." She glanced at David with a small smile. "But at least I'm not alone." David paused, choosing his words carefully. "I got the chance to be a real father. Not just the distant provider I used to be, but someone present, involved, someone who truly knows his children." He looked at Ethan and Lily. "I still make a lot of mistakes. I'll probably keep making them. But now at least I'm making mistakes while trying, instead of making mistakes by not trying at all. So," Lily raised her glass higher, "a toast to 6 months of an imperfect but real family, and to the next 6 months and the ones after those, all complicated and messy but ours. To family, they all said together, their glasses clinking. October was relatively calm, a welcome respite after so many intense months. A routine had established itself, dinners on Thursdays, alternating weekends where Lily spent time at David's apartment. She had her own room now, decorated according to her tastes, not some expensive designers. Individual and family therapy sessions, daily messages in a WhatsApp group that Ethan had created called The Strangest Family in NYC. Marina and David developed something resembling friendship. They had coffee together twice a week, just the two of them, discussing decisions about Lily, but also talking about work, life, everything. The sexual tension that had existed 15 years ago was dead, or at least dormant enough to be ignored. In its place was something more solid, genuine partnership. November brought a surprise. Mrs. Beatrice asked to meet Lily. The grandmother had spent months in stubborn silence, but eventually her love for Ethan, and possibly her curiosity about Lily, overcame her pride. She called David asking for a meeting, promising civilized behavior. The meeting was carefully orchestrated at a neutral afternoon tea in a five-star hotel, Mrs. Beatrice's choice, but with Marina and everyone else present, David's requirement. Mrs. Beatrice arrived impeccably dressed, perfect posture, but there was something different in her eyes when she finally looked at Lily. "You have his eyes," was the first thing Mrs. Beatrice said, studying Lily as if she were a painting in a museum. "Exactly the same." "That's what everyone says," Lily replied calmly, not intimidated by her grandmother's imposing presence. There was a tense silence, and then Mrs. Beatrice did something that shocked everyone. She took Lily's hand across the table. "I was terrible," Mrs. Beatrice said, and there was something in her voice, not exactly regret, but perhaps the closest she could get to it. "When I learned about you, my first reaction was anger. Anger that my son had hidden this, anger that our name was involved in a scandalous situation, all those selfish reasons." She paused. "But you are my granddaughter, and Ethan made me realize that I was putting pride above family." Lily didn't respond immediately, processing that unexpected approach. Finally, she said, "I don't need a grandmother who is with me out of obligation or guilt. But if you really want to get to know me, without judgments about my mother or how I came into this world, then I would like to get to know you, too." It was a hesitant start, but a start nonetheless. Mrs. Beatrice didn't magically become warm or welcoming, it wasn't in her nature, but she began to make an effort. She remembered birthdays, occasionally showed up at Thursday dinners, always tense, always formal but present, and slowly built a bridge over the chasm she had created herself. December arrived with the approach of Christmas, and with it, a decision to be made. How would the family celebrate together for the first time? It was Ethan who suggested, what if we rented a house in Aspen for a week? None of our territories, just the four of us in some neutral place. Marina immediately thought of the cost, but David, slowly learning to anticipate her objections, quickly said, "We'll split everything equally. Rent, food, everything. No charity, just a family trip sharing costs." Marina hesitated, but Lily nudged her. "Mum, can you put your pride aside just this once, please?" So Marina agreed, and in the third week of December, the four of them traveled to Aspen in 2 cars. Marina insisted on driving her own car with Lily, refusing a ride in David's Tesla, to spend a week together. The rented house was cozy, with a fireplace surrounded by pine trees overlooking the mountains. It smelled of wood and pine. It had 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen where everyone could cook together, a living room with large windows and comfortable sofas. During that week, something magical happened. They finally stopped trying and just were. They were family in the most natural way possible. They cooked together, argued over seasoning, Marina thought David used too much salt. David thought Marina didn't use enough herbs. They played board games late into the night, shamelessly cheated, laughed until their bellies hurt. They hiked the chilly trails, drank hot chocolate with marshmallows, took ridiculous selfies in Christmas hats. On Christmas night, they decorated the tree they had bought together. A real tree that shed needles everywhere and was imperfect but beautiful. Each one placed ornaments, sharing stories. Marina talked about past Christmases with Lily, just the two of them, happy despite being simple. Ethan shared about formal and empty Christmases with David and Mrs. Beatrice. David admitted that this was the first Christmas he truly felt present. Instead, as she placed the last ornament, a slightly crooked star she had made when she was 7 years old, and had been kept all these years, Lily said, "This is my first Christmas with Dad, with a complete family, and it's perfect exactly because it's imperfect." They opened presents that night, not expensive gifts, but thoughtful ones. Ethan gave Lily a book on astrophysics that he knew she wanted. Lily gave Ethan a model telescope that she had assembled herself. Marina gave David a framed photo of the four of them together, taken by a stranger during one of their hikes. And David gave Marina something that made her cry, a recommendation letter for a master's program in sustainability that she had casually mentioned months ago she always wanted to pursue, but never had the time or money for. "It's not charity," David quickly said when he saw her starting to protest. "It's recognition that you sacrificed your dreams for Lily for 15 years. And now that she has 2 parents, maybe it's time for you to pursue some things for yourself." Marina held that letter, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," was all she could say. They stayed up late, the fireplace crackling, talking about everything and nothing. At some point, Ethan and Lily fell asleep on the sofa, intertwined like puppies, and Marina and David covered them with blankets before stepping out onto the balcony. The air was cold, starry, perfect. They stood there in comfortable silence for a long time before David spoke. "Do you think we can do it?" he asked softly. "Make something good out of this whole mess?" Marina thought about the question, looking through the window at the 2 teenagers sleeping peacefully. "I think we're on the right path. We're not there yet, but we're getting there." "Where to?" "To being family, the weird, unconventional version, but real nonetheless." David nodded and then, hesitantly, put his arm around Marina's shoulders. Not romantic, just, comfortable. And Marina, after a moment's hesitation, rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," David said, "for giving it another chance, for letting me know my daughter, for everything." "Thank you for not giving up when it would have been easier," Marina replied, "for trying even when you didn't know how." They stayed like that for a long time, 2 ex-lovers who had become friends, co-parents, partners in building something that no manual taught how to do. The week in Aspen ended too soon. On New Year's Eve, they returned to New York City, to their separate but now intertwined lives. Marina and Lily to the apartment in Brooklyn, David and Ethan to the apartment in Manhattan. But something had fundamentally changed. They were no longer strangers forced to cooperate. They were, against all odds, truly family. January would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. Lily would start high school with all the anxieties that would bring. Ethan would be preparing for college entrance exams. Marina would begin her master's program. David would have new work crises to manage. There would be arguments, misunderstandings, moments of frustration. But now they had something they didn't have before: foundation, trust built through months of showing up, of trying, of choosing each other repeatedly, even when it was hard. On New Year's Eve, at 11:58 p.m., the 4 gathered again, this time at Marina's apartment because Lily insisted on ringing in the new year at home. They were on the small balcony that barely fit all four of them, watching the fireworks that were already starting to explode all over New York City. "Shall we make New Year's resolutions?" Ethan suggested. "I promise," Lily began, "to keep giving chances to this quirky family we have. I promise," Ethan continued, "to be less insecure about my place here. I promise," Marina said, "to work on my pride, to accept help when necessary without seeing it as a loss of independence. I promise," David concluded, "to keep learning how to be the father and the person you all deserve, even when it's uncomfortable." At midnight, the fireworks exploded over New York City in a waterfall of colors and light. The four embraced there on that small balcony, a clumsy but genuine group hug, four people who shouldn't make sense together but somehow did. "Happy New Year," Marina said, looking at each of them, at Lily, her beloved daughter, at Ethan, the boy who had become like a second son, at David, the man she once loved, then hated, and now was something different, something without a defined name, but important nonetheless. "Happy New Year," they all echoed. And there, as New York City erupted in celebration around them, four lives irrevocably intertwined, by the truth finally revealed, by the choice to keep trying, by the imperfect but real love they had built from the ashes of 15 years of silence, they began a new year. Not with promises of perfection, not with illusions that it would be easy, but with the commitment that, no matter what came, they would face it together. Because in the end, that's what family meant. Not perfect people, but people who chose to stay, who chose to try, who chose to love despite all the imperfections and complications. And as the last fireworks faded in the New York City sky, turning into smoke that rose to join the stars, Marina looked at David and saw something reflected in his eyes that she felt too. Gratitude. For second chances. For truths revealed. For this strange and imperfect family that would never have existed if not for a chance meeting at a restaurant on a March night. Life hadn't given them fairy tale endings, but it had given something better. The opportunity to build something real, honest, and true from chaos and pain. And sometimes that was more than enough. It was everything.